The electricity bill is $12 a month, and food costs $1.70 a day. You have to strictly adhere to this. And don't you spend money on makeup and clothes. If you can't do that, we're getting a divorce. I was speechless at my husband's unbelievable demands. It was obviously impossible. I could feel anger seeping into me. As you said yesterday, I'll start saving rigorously from today. I'll be careful not to waste money. My name is Mirabelle, a 34-year-old housewife. I graduated from high school and then went on to a vocational school, after which I got a job at a private company. However, the company suddenly went bankrupt, and I found myself unemployed after just 3 years. I started looking for a job while receiving unemployment benefits for about a year, but honestly, I couldn't find a company that felt right. During this time, I heard about the increasing number of people working from home as freelancers and decided to work as a web designer from home. After working as an employee for 3 years, I realized that being an office worker wasn't for me. I've always struggled with waking up early, and I hated going to the office buildings in the city on packed trains like everyone else. And frankly, I wasn't good at acting as part of a group and taking collective action. So, the idea of working alone at home seemed perfect. At first, I took any job I could, no matter how simple or low-paying, to build up my experience. Initially, my salary was just pocket money, but since I had no desire for material things, I managed to save quite a bit over 3 years, so I wasn't worried about living expenses. About a year and a half later, I was finally earning a salary comparable to that of a newly graduated full-time employee. It's amazing to be able to earn money without being disturbed or rushed by anyone. Thinking this, I continued to take on more work and kept busy. Before I knew it, time had flown by, and I had turned 31. I met my husband, Ken, around that time. It was at the wedding of a dear friend. Seeing my best friend looking so happy made me feel happy too. After the wedding, I attended the reception, where I happened to sit next to Ken. Despite the glamorous setting of a wedding, my first impression was of someone who seemed cold and without a smile. But shortly after the reception started, he suddenly gave me a band-aid, saying, "Here, take this." "Why?" "Because your foot looks painful," he answered gruffly, his gaze fixed on my foot. Actually, I had a blister from wearing heels I wasn't used to for too long. Ken had noticed it. "Ah, thank you." "It's no big deal." "But why wear heels if they hurt your feet?" "What do you mean?" "I don't really like heels either." "But they match the dress better, right?" "I see. Well, women have it tough, huh?" Ken said this and laughed with a crinkled smile. I was drawn to him, a little mean-looking but kindly and cutely smiling. As the reception was winding down, and when we were about to leave, he asked for my contact information. He seemed more embarrassed than unfriendly then. I didn't want to regret it if we never met again. Hearing him ask this way, a bit fidgety, made my heart flutter. From that day, we started communicating frequently, going on dates, and eventually, we became a couple. Ken had always lived with his parents, so it became a routine for us to go back to my place, where I lived alone. And before I knew it, Ken had moved in with me, and we had started living together without really deciding to. On our second anniversary, he suddenly gave me a ring. It's been 2 years, so I thought I had to take responsibility. "Mirabelle, will you marry me?" I was overjoyed when he said this. I immediately said yes, and we decided to get married. When we got married, I quit my job. My husband was what you'd call a traditional breadwinner. "Mirabelle, you take care of the home," he had said when we got married. I had my doubts about becoming a full-time housewife since my job was finally on track, but both my mother and my husband's mother were housewives. It wasn't as if I didn't have the value of a wife being a homemaker. Besides, I don't hate cooking or doing laundry, and above all, I think I'll be glad to be a stay-at-home mom when we have kids. I figured it wouldn't be a problem to start working again once the kids are older. We had a peaceful marriage without any fights, but there was something about my husband that bothered me a bit. He was extremely frugal, to an odd extent. For example, we couldn't use vending machines or convenience stores at all. He would say it's just a waste of money and basically banned buying from such places. Sure, buying from the supermarket can save you a few cents here and there, and I could understand that. But there are more stories about my husband's frugality. All our furniture can be secondhand, or heck, we can even pick up stuff that's been thrown out. Buying new is just a waste of money, he'd say, and so we furnished our new home mostly with used items. Because of his personality, I couldn't spend any money on my appearance or beauty. For instance, after going to get my hair cut for the first time in a year, he muttered, "You got your hair cut? Women are so expensive. And it all comes out of my earnings, too." I had held back and only went after a year, and the first thing he says is to criticize the expense. Even I felt disgusted at this comment. I don't have a penny I can spend freely. Looking at SNS, seeing friends happily traveling or dressing up, I couldn't help but feel envious. And amidst all this, we hit an even bigger obstacle. There was no sign of us having kids. 2 years had passed since we got married, but nothing happened. Why can't we have kids? My husband grew angry and more frustrated day by day. He seemed quite anxious about not being able to have children. On the other hand, I wasn't as anxious as he was. It's a gift, and I thought as long as I could enjoy a happy life with my husband, whether or not we could have kids didn't matter. Just because we got married, it doesn't mean we absolutely have to have children. That's what I thought, but as my husband's irritation grew day by day, so did his harshness towards me. "Are you infertile or something?" My husband looked at me with suspicion, frowning. "I don't know unless we get tested, but why are you suddenly saying such a thing? Infertility is mostly the woman's fault, right?" No, nowadays it's pretty much 50-50 between men and women. So, it's not necessarily just my fault, I think. What are you talking about? That's just a convenient claim by women. Then, how about we go to the hospital? Let's both get tested and see. I'm already over 30 and I don't want to argue about who's at fault. If we find out the cause, we can get treatment and maybe clear up some of this fog, I thought. However, my husband refused. It's probably your issue anyway, so you go alone. Plus, if both of us go, it'll cost double for the tests. That's just too wasteful. So, with my husband angry, I had no choice but to go to the hospital alone for the tests. But, there was nothing abnormal with the results. A few days later, I reported the test results to my husband. I got tested, and there's nothing wrong. The doctor said to bring my husband next time. So, how about you get tested too, Ken? There were quite a few men at the hospital. I meant it, thinking of my husband who wanted kids. However, he didn't take kindly to this suggestion at all. Huh? Are you trying to say it's my fault? No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying there's a possibility, so let's check. So, there's no way it's my fault. It's probably because you're getting older, isn't it? Excuse me? Isn't it true that a woman's fertility drops significantly after she turns 30? In the end, it's your fault. Seeing my husband glare at me like that sent shivers down my spine. How could we not communicate at all? And from that time, my husband's attitude towards me got worse. There was one day. I usually start preparing dinner around 4 p.m. so that it's ready as soon as my husband gets home. But that day, I was running around, having been to the dentist and out in town for errands. Because of that, I couldn't start preparing dinner until around 6 p.m. I was rushing to get ready, but my husband came home in the middle of preparations. Hey, it's already this late and dinner's not ready? Sorry. I was a bit busy today. When I said that, my husband got furious, his face turning red. You're always lazing around. You're always lounging at home, at least do the chores properly. I'm not lounging around at all. Humph. Anyway, don't inconvenience me. If there's no dinner, I'm going out to drink. Saying that, my husband left and didn't come back until morning. From that day, I tightened up my feelings even more. I made sure dinner was ready by the time my husband returned. I diligently did all the housework, cleaning, and laundry. But it seemed like no matter how hard I tried, it didn't matter to my husband. He never returned to the kind husband he used to be. Moreover, recently he's hardly ever home, always saying he has overtime or business dinners. With my husband hardly ever at home, eventually, we even started sleeping in separate bedrooms. Our intimate life decreased, not to mention completely vanished, and having kids was out of the question. He rarely comes home, but tells me not to indulge in luxury with the money he earns, not even allowing me to have lunch with friends. When I pull out clothes that have been sleeping in the back of the closet for a while, he explodes, "Hey, when did you buy those clothes?" He seemed convinced when I explained they weren't new, just old clothes I had worn before, but he raised his voice, "Don't you dare buy makeup or clothes on a whim and indulge in luxury." Being treated this harshly certainly built up stress. With my husband coming home late, and me wanting to work during the day to spend that money freely, he wouldn't allow it. "Just focus on your chores quietly." Saying that, my husband went back to his room. Tears overflowed from my eyes as I watched his back. Can this really be called a marriage? I wonder if I'm not just a housekeeper under the guise of a stay-at-home wife. No, a maid who actually gets paid would be better off. The word divorce crosses my mind again and again. If he's still concerned about not having children, we need to talk about it. Hey, why don't we give up on having kids and go back to being the close couple we used to be? When I said that, my husband got angry again. What do you mean, giving up on your own? Are you trying to say I'm defective? Nobody's saying that. No matter how I tried to argue, I was just shouted down. After that, I stopped saying anything to my husband. Every day was just going through the motions of household chores. About half a year into these days, my husband unusually started a conversation. "Hey, how much is our electric bill?" He always says to save and not to indulge, yet he leaves the entire household finances to me. He has no idea how much the utilities and groceries cost. But, since he had never asked something like this before, I was a bit surprised and confused. "Why are you asking all of a sudden? Just tell me." The electric bill is about $170, I guess." "What? $170 is way too much." I had no idea why he was so shocked. "I think that's normal, though." Indeed, we use the heater in the winter, and since we have an induction cooker, cooking dishes that take a long time can add up on the electric bill. But I thought it was average overall. However, according to my husband, I'm apparently wasting electricity while he's at work. "Hey, aren't you wasting money on electricity while I'm at work?" No, that's not true. I make sure it's warm during the day and bundle up when it's cold to avoid using the heater. And I hardly watch TV. You're the one who stays up late playing video games with both the air conditioning and the lights on. My husband, pointed out like this, asked irritably, "Then how much do we spend on groceries?" "About $510, I guess." "What? Why are you spending so much? That's way too extravagant." "Extravagant? Are you serious? $510 for groceries for a couple is doing quite well. Especially now, with prices skyrocketing, food is really expensive." I didn't think my husband was so out of touch with reality. "You're splurging too much on electricity and groceries. If you're a stay-at-home wife, you should manage better. Don't tell me you're secretly spending that much on your clothes and makeup." "There's no way. I want to dress up and have new clothes and makeup too. But I've been holding back because you're against it." I've only been buying the bare minimum and have been trying to save on groceries and electricity. Yet, why do I have to be spoken to like this? I bit my lip in frustration. Then my husband said something outrageous. "Listen, I didn't let you be a stay-at-home wife so you could indulge in luxury. The electric bill should be $12 a month, and groceries should be $1.70 a day. You need to strictly adhere to this." And don't you spend money on makeup and clothes. If you can't do that, we're getting a divorce. I was speechless at my husband's unbelievable demands. It was obviously impossible. My husband, who lived with his parents until we got married, probably doesn't know how much things cost. I'm at a loss for words on how to explain this to my husband with his skewed sense of money. But my husband didn't give me time to think. Hey, your response? This is why I hate incompetent stay-at-home wives. My husband looked down on me as he said that. Well, you don't have the money or a job to leave anyway. Without me, you'd be living on the streets. Anger was seeping into me. The kind Ken I knew was gone. Looking at my husband laughing derisively and looking down on me, I felt utterly disappointed. The next day, as I sent my husband off as usual, I said this. As you said yesterday, I'll start saving diligently from today. I'll be careful not to waste money. If you understand that, then it's fine. I'll forgive you if you change. I'll let you stay in this house. With a triumphant smile, my husband cheerfully went to work. I immediately called my in-laws. Since my parents live far away, I can't see them often. Instead, my in-laws, who live about a 20-minute drive from my house, have always been kind to me. My in-laws are my lifeline. When I explained the situation to my mother-in-law, she was shocked and apologized to me. You're doing a great job, I think. It's the responsibility of me and your father for spoiling Kent too much. I'm really sorry. I made a certain proposal to my mother-in-law, who apologized, and she gladly accepted it, eager to help. That day, my husband came home at the usual time. Normally, when my husband texts me he's coming home, I warm up dinner and unlock the door. But today, there was no warming up dinner or unlocking the door. Thinking the door would be unlocked, my husband jiggled the front door once, realized it wasn't open, and then unlocked it himself to enter the house. Hey, Mirabelle. Why didn't you unlock the door? He entered angrily, stomping down the hallway, and the moment he opened the living room door, he exclaimed. What? What are you doing? On the table, a candle was placed, and I was sitting at the dining table. I looked at my husband with cold eyes and said, "Welcome home." What are you doing? Why aren't the lights on? You said the electric bill should be $12, right? To achieve that, we have to refrain from using electricity. Our house is all electric, and there's a basic fee, so using electricity would just exceed that. So, I canceled it. What? Canceled? What are you talking about? While frantically pressing the light switch and getting irritated, my husband didn't realize. Of course, I hadn't really canceled anything, I had just turned off the breaker. But my husband, who had never worried about such things, wouldn't know. So, I canceled it, which means flipping the switch won't do anything. You seriously canceled it? Why would you do something like that on your own? With a flashlight and candles, we'll be fine. This way, we'll stay within $12. When I said that, my husband sighed heavily. Crap, what the hell? Fine. Just serve dinner already. So, I served the dinner I had prepared for today. What? What is this? What do you mean? It's just an egg and salt. Oh, and this, water. Don't mess with me. Is this some kind of joke meal? Well, you said the grocery budget is $1.70 a day. If you consider the condiments, it barely comes under $1.70, doesn't it? I smiled broadly. My husband was dumbfounded. Are you out of your mind? Forget it, I don't want it today. I'm going to take a bath. Holding a flashlight, my husband stomped off to the bathroom. I couldn't hold back my laughter as I watched him leave. And the moment my husband turned on the shower, his scream echoed from the bathroom. What the hell? Why is it so cold? I said we're all electric, right? So, no hot water. Oh, you didn't know that? I approached the bathroom and said that. Damn. I could hear my husband's frustrated voice. I quickly gathered up the flashlight and all his clothes he had left in the living room and went back. Then, from the bathroom, it's cold, I'm going to catch a cold. Hey, Mirabelle. Mirabelle, his voice called out in the darkness. Since I always prepare pajamas and towels for him, my husband couldn't even manage post-bath preparations himself. Dripping wet, he came into the living room. Hey, why don't you come no matter how many times I call? Without a towel or clothes, and after being drenched in cold water in the dead of winter, he couldn't dry himself off. My husband sneezed loudly, as if he was quite cold. He was shivering badly and seemed to have trouble speaking. Oh right. The towels, clothes, and the pajamas you always wore were all worn out, so I threw them away. I wanted to buy you new pajamas, but you said the budget for clothes was $0 yesterday, right? So, I couldn't buy them, and I thought buying towels would be considered wasteful. Ah, but I do have this. What I offered to my shivering husband was a rag. What is this, a rag? Are you kidding me? I bought the rag for cleaning at the end of the year. So, that's all I had. Don't mess with me. There's a limit to how much you can disrespect your husband. My husband raised his voice. Then, from the darkness, a man's voice, lower than my husband's, was heard. Who's messing around now? With those words from my father-in-law, my mother-in-law flicked on the breaker, turning on the lights. Blinking in the suddenly bright light, my husband looked toward where the voice came from. What? Dad, Mom. Why are the lights on? In front of my soaking wet, naked husband stood my mother-in-law and father-in-law, arms crossed. My husband just stood there, frozen in shock. How did you end up being such a disappointing son? Really? What you have to show for yourself is disappointing too. My husband sheepishly covered his groin. My mother-in-law threw him his pants, which he hurriedly put on. Do you have any idea how disrespectful you've been to Mirabelle? It's truly embarrassing as your parents to know you're so unaware of common sense. My husband, scolded severely by his own parents, shrank like a scolded puppy and began to sit. We heard you were spouting nonsense, so we thought we'd come and talk directly. Right? As my father-in-law said that, my mother, who had been waiting in the bedroom, peeked out. It's been a while, Ken, she said with a bright smile, which made my husband's face turn pale. An electric bill of $12 and groceries of $1.70 a day? You'd exceed that in about an hour. To demand that from two adults' living expenses, anyone would realize it's unreasonable if they thought about it. Or do you have the skills to save that much? My mother-in-law and father-in-law stepped closer to my husband, looking down on him like demons. My husband began to sweat profusely. I'm really, truly sorry. He apologized again and again. Then, my husband's phone rang. At that moment, my husband looked like he knew he was in trouble. Not missing a beat, my father-in-law grabbed the phone from the table and put it on speaker. Hello? You said earlier your wife went crazy and you'd be coming to my place, but you haven't shown up? I'm getting tired of waiting. A sweet female voice came through the phone. Hey, Kent. What's this about? We all looked at my husband at once. No, this isn't what it looks like. My husband looked around, clearly flustered. I borrowed the smartphone from my father-in-law and answered instead. Kent is naked with me right now. What? Who are you? Which woman are you? I'm Kent's wife. Wife? Why? I'll be asking for alimony later. We're busy right now, so I'm hanging up. The voice of my husband's mistress, too shocked to speak, came through. I ignored it and hung up. So, you forced me to save while you were having an affair? No, it's not like that. Just as my husband tried to make excuses, my father-in-law gave him a smack. Ouch! You're really the lowest kind of man. It hurts. Dad, please stop. My father-in-law continued to smack him. My husband started trembling, his face turning pale. And then he admitted to the affair and apologized to me repeatedly. I'll never forgive you. I'll get the alimony and we're getting a divorce. After being smacked multiple times by my father-in-law, my husband was completely disheartened. He quietly agreed to the divorce, and afterward, we signed the divorce papers. I demanded alimony from my husband and his mistress. I managed to get $51,000 from each of them, enough money to live on my own. I'm grateful to my in-laws for their support in the divorce. Afterward, I resumed my freelance work and have been able to lead a stable life. For now, I think I'll focus on work, save money, and gradually enrich my personal life, putting romance on hold for a while. Let's break off our engagement. I'm marrying her instead. What? That's the way it is, sorry about that. The one laughing triumphantly next to him is my half-sister. Several months have passed since that shocking event. Just as the wound from the broken engagement began to fade and I started to move forward, I saw my sister again on my way home from work. Huh? Why are you here? I tried to hurry past without her noticing, but she said, "Found you. I've been looking for you." She seemed angry, but I had no idea why I should be the one being scolded. If anything, I should be the one who's mad. What do you want? I've got nothing to say to you. What the hell is going on? You've been lying to me, haven't you? Huh? What on earth are you talking about? I'm a saleswoman and I just turned 30. A year ago, I started dating a man named Michael and he proposed to me a month ago. We were engaged, but that was called off today. As someone who wants to get married and have kids like me, having the engagement broken off just before turned 30 is nothing short of a disaster. After breaking up with Michael, I headed straight to my family home where my mother was waiting. Of course, the fact that my engagement was off, and the reason why, was too cruel to bear alone, so I called my mom immediately. She quickly said, "I'm at home right now, so come over." "Where are you? Should I come and get you?" Even though I was dumped by my fiancé, there were people who cared for me. Just feeling that lightened my heart a little. I told her I could get home myself and, with my mind blank, I got on the train and headed for my family home. When I arrived, my mother was waiting for me at the front door and said, "Welcome home." I'm home. As I said that, the tears I had been holding back came pouring out like a waterfall. Without asking what had happened, my mother silently waited for my tears to calm down. Then, when my tears had subsided a bit, I started to tell my mother about what had happened that day. I was supposed to meet Michael today, but when I got to the meeting place, Becky was there too. What? It's not surprising that my mother was shocked. Becky is my half-sister. Although she's my half-sister, we can't exactly say we get along well. We've had a complicated relationship since forever. I had never introduced Michael to her, so I had no idea why Becky and Michael were together. But the unexpected pair had more shocking news. "Harper, there's something I have to tell you today. I want to break off our engagement." What? Of course, I couldn't accept it right away. Things had been going well with Michael recently. We had even taken a short trip last week and discussed our wedding rings. There had been no signs that he was going to break up with me. Why? Can you tell me why? I had a bad feeling when I saw Becky next to him. That's because Becky has always tried to steal my boyfriends and friends in the past. But after growing up, none of this happened, and I honestly thought it wouldn't happen anymore. I wanted to believe so. But Michael's reply was, "I've fallen in love with someone. I intend to marry her." That's what he said. And when I saw him looking at Becky so adoringly, I felt dizzy. Becky looked at me triumphantly and said, "That's the way it is." Sorry about that. Michael may not know about my relationship with Becky. Even so, I couldn't believe this was a coincidence. I was certain that Becky had planned this, to break off my engagement. But even knowing that, there's nothing I can do now. If Michael has fallen in love with Becky, no matter how much I try to convince him otherwise, it will just sound like I'm a sore loser. I should be angrier at having the person I promised to marry taken from me. Maybe I should be clinging more, saying I don't want to break up. But I couldn't do that. I felt that if I did, I would feel even more miserable. I understand, it's okay now. I said just that in a small voice, and turned my back on them. Then I called my mom, and that brings us to now. After hearing everything, my mom paused a bit, and then in a kind voice said, "You must have been through a lot, cry all you want until you feel okay." Yeah, thanks. I'm really glad to have my mom. It's going to be tough for a while, but I'll surely be able to think positively. That's when my mom shocked me with her words. But, it's a good thing. Even if you had married your fiancé, I don't think you would have been happy. That's what I believe. I was taken aback by the unexpected statement. What? What do you mean? Then my mom smiled softly and said, "Because he's a man who could easily discard a wonderful woman like you. Also, I don't think things will go well between those two. Happiness built on hurting others so ruthlessly is fragile. There's something else that's been on my mind. I don't have proof, so I can't say it now. But I'm sure you'll understand soon, Harper. Don't worry, you're going to be happy." I was really curious about what my mom wanted to say, but I don't have the energy to think deeply now, and strangely I could trust my mom's words. So that day, I didn't pursue it any further and decided to go back to my own house because I had work the next day. On my way home, I was absent-mindedly thinking about the past. My parents divorced when I was 3 years old. My dad had an affair and left us. My mom has raised me by herself ever since. And the woman he had an affair with was Becky's mother. I have no intention of denying Becky's existence. But considering Becky is 2 years younger than me, it's easy to see how despicable my father's actions were. As an adult, I feel this more deeply. Even so, my father, as he is, seemed to care a bit about me, his daughter. He always sent me a gift for my birthday, and would take me out for meals a few times a year. When I was young and didn't even understand the meaning of the word affair, I purely loved my father who would come to see me. And my mom never said anything against that. I first met Becky when I was in the 3rd grade. Normally, I would dine with my dad, just the two of us, but this was the first time he brought along Becky. I was still a child back then, so I didn't care who Becky was or anything about her. I was just thrilled to be able to play with a girl slightly younger than me. Of course, Becky was just a kid at that time too. Regardless of our respective statuses and relationships, I remember playing well together. Looking back now, I wonder what was going on in my dad's head to make us meet. During elementary school, days passed where I would occasionally meet my dad and Becky, and we would eat together. But as I entered middle school and became busier with club activities and tutoring, naturally the times I saw my dad decreased. By the time I was in the 8th grade, even the messages from my dad ceased. By then, I knew without needing the specifics that my parents had divorced and my dad had a new family. Understanding that fact, I didn't think about contacting him. I can't say that I didn't feel lonely, but I thought that my mom must have been feeling this way even before me. But one day, when I was in the 9th grade, Becky enrolled in our school as a new student. I had no idea where she lived, so I never thought she'd end up at the same middle school. When I saw her, it felt like I was reuniting with an old friend, so I called out to her. "Becky, long time no see." Since elementary school, Becky had always been the girl with soft, white hair, big eyes, and long eyelashes. She was the epitome of the kind of beautiful girl that other girls admired, but in middle school, she had become even more stunning. Indeed, she was so noticeable among the new students that she became a hot topic in my grade. When I called out to her, Becky stared at me with her large eyes and said, "Who are you?" I could tell it was her right away, but had she forgotten me? Considering how young she was when we used to play together, it was understandable. Given the complicated nature of our relationship, I hesitated to explain. Although I was disappointed that we couldn't have a proper conversation, I opened my mouth, deciding to pretend it was a case of mistaken identity. Then, Becky said, "Oh, you're the poor girl who got dumped by my dad." Huh? Even Becky's friends who were with her were taken aback and asked her to repeat. Apparently, my dad was deceived by a terrible woman when he was young. He couldn't bear it, divorced her, and then married my mom. Do you need something? You're scaring me. With that, Becky started to act afraid of me. What? What do you mean, terrible woman? Your dad is the terrible one, isn't he? I couldn't help but retort. But this was just so typical of Becky. No matter how much I tried to explain myself, the atmosphere had entirely shifted in Becky's favor. You're a scary senior. If you continue to bully Becky, we'll report you to the student guidance counselor. That's what one of Becky's friends told me. No, I didn't mean it like that. Regardless of what I said, I was not believed and ended up being gossiped about in school as the senior who bullied the cute junior out of jealousy. We used to play together so well when we were kids. I couldn't fathom why Becky acted the way she did, and it broke my heart. I was even dumped by my boyfriend, who accused me of bullying a junior, something he said he hadn't expected from me. To add insult to injury, a few months later, he was dating Becky. This happened twice. I understand that in a small middle school community, it's not unheard of to date the same person. But for it to happen twice? That was beyond mere coincidence. I tried confronting Becky about it, but it only backfired with further accusations of me being a bully. Moreover, these false rumors about me never cleared up until graduation. I finally gave up on understanding Becky and chose to attend a high school where no one from my middle school was enrolled. No one knew about the rumors, and there was no Becky, so I wasn't worried about any further gossip. I was at peace with my high school life, but in the spring of my junior year, I was in for the worst surprise. Becky had enrolled in the same high school. And she was also a manager of the soccer club, just like me. As soon as Becky saw me, she said, "Oh, Harper is here too, nice to see you." This time, she was acting like a sweet junior. This is the same girl who gave me a hard time back in middle school. I just couldn't keep up with her dramatic transformation, and I didn't even feel like building a good relationship as senior and junior. I had no intention of being mean, but I was scared because I had no idea what Becky was planning behind her smiles. My bad hunch proved right. Harper, why are you so cold to me? Did I do something wrong? I'm upset. Becky accused me of this while crying in front of the whole soccer team. What? I didn't think I had been that harsh, and if anyone had been mean, it was always her towards me. Becky was playing the victim and trying to demean me. She did it again. I thought to myself, but it was too late. All the team members adored Becky, who was cute, cheerful, and considerate. I thought I had established a good relationship of trust as a manager, but in this situation, no matter how much I struggled, I was the bad guy. I ended up being warned by the school administration for bullying my junior, and my position in the soccer team also suffered. I was perfectly labeled as a mean senior who bullied her junior. Back then, I had a crush on the soccer team captain of my grade. I had been quietly nurturing this feeling for over 2 years, and although it may sound presumptuous, I think we had been getting along well, going out on our days off and such. But with this rumor spreading, I was obviously kept at a distance. And when summer vacation ended, he was dating Becky, and I thought it was a nightmare. Why is Becky so against me? I have nothing to say if all of this is said to be a coincidence. But have I done something to Becky that she has to bother me even at school club activities? If the one who took away my father was resentful, I would understand, but Becky has both parents and should be living happily. No matter how much I thought about it, I couldn't understand Becky's thoughts. I ended my high school life in the worst possible way and decided to study abroad in hopes of escaping Becky's pursuit. Becky didn't follow me that far. Even after finishing my study abroad and living in Japan, Becky didn't show up for a while. After graduating from high school, I didn't know what Becky was doing or where she was. I was trying to forget the nightmares of my student days and the source of them, Becky, and was trying to get married and be happy. I didn't expect to be messed with by Becky again here. Is it a twist of fate, or is Becky planning something again? I don't know, but I definitely don't want to live my life in fear of Becky. I was sure of that. From then on, I took on more work than usual to avoid unnecessary thoughts. Unlike love, the more you work, the more results you get. I was recognized by my boss for my good work, and these successful experiences gradually healed my heart. My mom was right. As long as I don't give up, I can live positively. Just when I thought so, a few months after the breakup with Michael, when I finished my work and arrived at the station to go home, I saw a surprising sight.
Becky?
I saw Becky standing in front of a sculpture near the station. She seemed to be waiting for someone. I wondered if she might be meeting up with Michael. Regardless, I absolutely could not let myself bump into Becky. Although I don't currently have a boyfriend or anyone I'm fond of, you never know what else she might take from me. Making sure she didn't notice me, I swiftly made my way to the ticket gates. But then, I heard a voice exclaim, "Found you. I was looking for you." And the next thing I knew, my arm was firmly grasped. I could see anger in her eyes, but I couldn't understand why I should be the one she's mad at. Rather, I'm the one who should be mad.
What do you want?
I don't have anything to talk about, I told her, shaking off Becky's hand. But she grabbed my wrist again, forcefully, and dragged me to the side of the ticket gate. Just how selfish and pushy can this woman be? With a feeling somewhere between shock and exasperation, I quietly followed her. When we finally reached a less crowded spot, Becky angrily spat out, "What's the meaning of all this? You've been deceiving me, haven't you?"
What are you talking about?
I retorted instantly, as I had no clue what she was talking about.
Don't play dumb with me, it's about Michael, obviously. Huh.
I'm the one who was hurt the most when it comes to Michael. There's no reason for her to yell at me. And then, Becky uttered words I couldn't believe. "Michael took $20,000 from me. You must have conspired with him, didn't you?"
What? What are you talking about?
Seeing my genuine surprise, Becky sank to the ground, out of energy.
So you're saying you didn't know? Michael said he needed $20,000 for his sick mom's operation, so I lent him the money. But the day after I gave him the money, I couldn't get in touch with him. His house was empty. I thought you used Michael to get back at me for taking all the men away from you, but is that really not the case?
If what she said is true, did Michael commit marriage fraud? I can't believe the person I was engaged to turned out to be a fraud. The thought of it sends chills down my spine.
I really didn't know. Sure, Michael said the same thing to me, but I didn't have that kind of savings, and I said I couldn't ask my mom for it either, so he immediately broke off our engagement. I don't know how you two met, but perhaps when he realized he couldn't get money from me, he switched his target to you.
I was surprised at myself for being able to talk about Michael, who I was heartbroken over, as if it was someone else's business. But Becky, of course, wasn't in a place to think about that.
I was irritated when I saw you coming out of a jewelry store, looking happy with a guy. That's why I stole him to get back at you, but I never thought it would turn out like this.
I finally heard Becky's true feelings. As I suspected, she had intentionally stolen my boyfriends, the men I loved, and even my fiancé. I said to Becky, exasperated,
"You're beautiful and have a bright, captivating charm. But because you've only wished for my misfortune and acted thoughtlessly, haven't you brought this unnecessary disaster upon yourself? If you hadn't interfered this time, I might have been the one hurt. You've made your own life difficult."
Then Becky cut off my words, yelling in anger,
"Shut up! Don't you dare lecture me! If it weren't for you, Dad would have been all mine. That's what I didn't like. Mom and Dad were always fighting over child support for you, and every time Dad visited you, Mom cried. I hated you."
This was the first time I heard Becky's true feelings. I, who was left alone with my mother, did feel the absence of my father from time to time, but I never had to witness their fights or experience any heart-wrenching feelings. Of course, I think my mom felt sad in ways I couldn't see. But I was raised happy as her daughter. On the other hand, Becky, who appeared to have a happy family with both parents, was dealing with struggles unknown to others. That's not to say I think it's okay for her to harass me, not at all. Hearing Becky's true feelings for the first time, a part of me couldn't help but feel sympathy.
I've lent out all my savings and even gotten into debt. I quit my job to get married. What am I supposed to do now? Becky lamented.
It's her own fault she got caught up in this marriage fraud while trying to harass me. Honestly, I can't help but think she brought this upon herself. But after hearing what she just said, I couldn't just stand by and do nothing.
I can't help you with money. But I can at least help you find a job, I offered. Huh?
She probably didn't expect me to throw her a lifeline. She looked at me in surprise.
Someone at my company just left their receptionist job. They're looking for a replacement. Of course, I won't forgive you if you try to harass me again. But if you've learned your lesson, I'll help as much as I can.
Even I thought I was being too lenient. But we are sisters after all. Seeing Becky so broken and crying, I couldn't just ignore her.
I am sorry. I'm really sorry.
Becky cried, sobbing uncontrollably. She must have been overwhelmed with regret for everything. From then on, Becky really did start working as a receptionist at my company. Even after all that harassment, and despite thinking I never wanted to have anything to do with her again. I can't believe I was stupid enough to invite her to work at the company where I work. As expected, Becky became popular in the company due to her vibrant appearance and innate brightness. But she's finally learned her lesson and doesn't harass me anymore. She looks a little embarrassed whenever I pass by, but she doesn't spread nasty rumors or speak in a fake voice. Honestly, I'm relieved. By the way, it seems that my mom once overheard a suspicious phone call from Michael when we were engaged. But she didn't have any evidence, so she was debating on what to say to me when the engagement was broken off. While the situation isn't what we imagined, in the end, my mom, Becky, and I are living our lives positively in unexpected ways. Whatever hardships may come in the future, I'll remember my mom's words.
No matter what, I'll be happy. I'll be fine.
I'll chant in my heart. Upon checking my phone, I saw that I had 13 missed calls. They were all from my mother-in-law, Martha. Not again. As I was pondering this, my phone vibrated once more.
Hello?
Upon answering the call, Martha raised her voice in anger.
Excuse me. Isn't the allowance for this month $3,000 due? Excuse me? I said, send the allowance. This month's payment hasn't been deposited yet.
Martha raged, completely disregarding my circumstances and only expressing her own desires. I'd had enough of her. Even in this situation, she doesn't reflect on her words and actions, does she? I've got no choice but to resort to my last option. I pulled myself together and blurted out to my phone.
Your son has passed away, so I can no longer send allowance.
My name is Jennifer Smith, 32 years old. I'm a busy working woman at a major financial firm and also a housewife. I got married about 2 years ago. I met my beloved husband, Mark, through our shared hobbies. He was kind to everyone, and I was attracted to his warm smile, quickly developing feelings for him. Apparently, he felt the same way, and after dating for a year, we immediately got engaged. We both believed that we wouldn't meet anyone better than each other. We were living together while dating, and without any major quarrels, we decided to marry. Everything went smoothly for us, but here's where a problem arose. That was Martha, my mother-in-law. My father-in-law had passed away a few years ago, and since Mark didn't have any siblings, his only family was Martha. The trouble started when I first visited her home to introduce myself before our wedding.
Nice to meet you.
Martha clearly showed a displeased expression.
So you're Mark's fiancé? Yes. My name is Jennifer Miller.
You're a rather plain girl. I wonder what Mark sees in you.
Huh?
I couldn't tell if she was joking or seriously meant what she said. Having such words directed at me by the mother of my loved one, I was quite shocked. Seeing my state, Mark frowned at Martha.
Hey, Mom. What's with the sudden harsh words? How can you say such things to the person I chose? No, Mark. I'm just trying to choose a suitable woman for you. Choose? I'm the one who chose her. You have no right to meddle. Don't say it in such a cold way. I'm just telling the truth because I care about you. If you were really thinking of me, you'd simply support us. Why can't you understand such a simple thing?
The air turned heavy as an argument unfolded between mother and son right before my eyes. Given that this was my first meeting with Martha, I wasn't in a position to intervene. Although the atmosphere remained awkward, we ultimately managed to express our intent to marry. As we were leaving, Martha called out to Mark, sounding somewhat disgruntled.
Mark, can I have a word? You're going to keep that promise after you get married, right? What promise? You know, about the allowance. Ah, that. Yes, I'll be sure to take care of that. Can we not discuss it here, please? Well, I was just asking.
Throughout, the atmosphere between my husband and his mother was tense, and the air was thick with discomfort. In the car on the way home, I asked Mark about the thing that had been bothering me.
Hey, Mark. About the conversation you had with your mom as we were leaving. Yeah, I should have told you about it, Jennifer. I heard something about an allowance. After my dad passed away, I've been sending money to my mom every month. How much? $2,000. What? $2,000?
I couldn't help but raise my voice in surprise. He then sighed deeply and began to speak slowly.
Actually, my mom has a debt. A debt? She lost a lot of money at a casino a long time ago. She's still paying it off, and because her health isn't great these days, she spends a lot of time at home. But she still needs money to live on, right? But $2,000, isn't that a bit too much? If I try to lower the amount, she keeps calling me over and over. And no matter what, a mother is still a mother. I worry about her living alone.
I see. Mark is really devoted to his mother. But of course, that makes sense. Since his father passed away, Martha has been the only family he has left. Regardless of her character, she's still his beloved mother. At that time, I only thought of my husband as a kind person. 2 months after our wedding, during my lunch break one day, I received a phone call on my smartphone. The call was from Martha. When I answered with a hello, Martha began to speak in a cheerful tone.
Jennifer? Long time no see. Can we chat for a bit? Yes. What can I do for you? Well, I was hoping you could start sending me money. Excuse me?
I was so taken aback she couldn't find the words to respond. However, Martha seemed excited to continue the conversation.
You mentioned before that you're working for a financial company, right? That means you have a good salary, doesn't it?
Well, not exactly.
What? You're lying to avoid giving me money?
That's not what I mean.
Then what is it?
But Martha, you're still receiving financial support from Mark, aren't you? To my question, Martha responded in defiance, so what? Jennifer sternly stated what she felt Martha was not appreciating.
Martha, receiving $2,000 monthly support is a big deal. And yet, you're asking for more. Really? You think so? If you were to send me an additional $1,000, I could avoid burdening Mark.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I have Mark as a guarantor for my debts. If I fail to make payments, the debt collectors will go after him. Do you understand? But aren't you using part of Mark's $2,000 to pay back the debt? I'm short. I haven't told Mark, but I have a significant amount of debt.
From Martha's tone, it was apparent that this was a fact even her husband was unaware of. Having children in the future would increase our expenses. In addition to that, taking over Martha's debt was not an easy task. But if Martha's payments fall behind, and the debt falls onto Mark, the interest will likely have accumulated significantly by that time. If I refused to send money, it would eventually become a problem for my husband as well. It was better for Martha to pay off her debt now. Thinking along those lines, I reluctantly agreed to Martha's proposal.
All right. I'll start sending you money. Really? Good God, Jennifer. I knew you would say that. The total with Mark's contribution will be $3,000. But this means you can pay off your debt, right? Yes, of course. I should be able to pay it all off in about a year. You promise, right? You'll make sure to pay off all your debts? I get it. So, I'll be expecting it from this month onwards.
Martha ended the call abruptly. Physical exhaustion from work combined with this emotional burden only added to my stress.
$1,000 a month, that's gonna be rough.
But it's also to prevent future problems for us. After all, if Martha can't make a living, it will upset Mark as well. That night, I promptly reported the matter to my husband. He told me I didn't have to do this, but I had already given my word to Martha, and it was a decision made for our future well-being. Mark expressed his gratitude and understanding, even as he maintained a sorry expression throughout. Time flew by, and 2 years have passed since then. The financial aid we thought would end in a year is still ongoing, and even now, we are transferring $3,000 every month to Martha. What's more, about 2 months ago, Mark fell ill and has been unable to go to work. He's on sick leave, so he's receiving disability benefits, but it's a mere pittance compared to his previous salary. Last month, I managed to transfer $3,000 to Martha from my savings, but it would be very challenging if this situation continues. And unbelievably, Martha has not once come to visit her sick son. We have told her his hospitalization, but she doesn't show up to see him, and only contacts me to ask, "You're still sending the money, right?" I was so angry that I decided to confront Mark about the issue. "Mark, listen. Don't you think it's wrong that Martha is only concerned about money, even though you're in such a state? We need to think seriously about what to do going forward." "Yeah, I've been thinking the same thing. I don't want to put more strain on you, Jennifer." This month, too, she's been bombarding me with calls and messages, asking if we've sent the money yet. Are you serious? How can she only think about money when her own son is sick? Mark showed his anger at his mother, his face slightly worn. Then, as if he had an idea, Mark exclaimed, "That's it," and wore a sly grin. "What is it, Mark?" "Well, this is our last resort. I've come up with something." "Something good?" "Yeah, for my mom." "What?" What Mark suggested was a plan I could never have imagined. Although it could be called inappropriate, that seemed to be the only way to make Martha understand. A few weeks later, Mark was discharged from the hospital. Martha didn't reply to any of our messages, so we didn't tell her about Mark's discharge. In the last 2 weeks, Martha has been relentlessly demanding the money. There's no point in sending money to a mother who doesn't even worry about her son. While Mark and I were enjoying a cup of tea, a message came in on my phone. Upon checking, I found 13 missed calls from Martha. Again. As I thought so, my phone vibrated again. It was another call from Martha. "Hello." I turned on the speakerphone so that Mark could hear, and Martha started shouting right away. "Listen. Where's the $3,000 for this month?" "Excuse me?" "That's right, the money. The money for this month hasn't been transferred yet." "Martha, do you realize? Mark is now. I don't care if he's in the hospital or whatever. It's none of my business. You're working at a good place, right? You must have plenty of savings. Hurry up and transfer it here." Martha was shouting angrily. Eventually, she said something unbelievable. "Listen. Since you married Mark, if he can't pay, you have to pay me, understand? If you refuse, I'll make you the guarantor, got it?" At that moment, something inside me snapped. She was displaying her desires openly, without considering our situation at all. I had reached my breaking point with her. She didn't even try to reflect on her own actions. Now, I had no choice but to resort to the last resort. I firmly declared into my smartphone, "Mark has passed away. I can't send you any more money." At these words, Martha blurted out a baffled "What?" Yes, this was the last resort that my husband suggested. Lie to Martha about Mark's death and observe her reaction. If she showed any sign of sadness, if she reflected on her behavior and apologized, we would continue to support her financially. But if she didn't reflect, if she demanded money, we would sever ties completely. Deep down, I thought that even a money-grubbing woman like Martha would deeply reflect on her actions if she were told that her own son had died. But the very next moment, Martha burst into loud laughter. "Yay! What's so funny?" "Well, isn't it obvious? If Mark is dead, that means his inheritance will be distributed to me too." "Excuse me? I've been looking into it since I heard that Mark was sick. Listen here, 2/3 of Mark's assets are yours, but 1/3 is mine." I was at a loss for words. I never thought that when she first heard that her son was sick, she wouldn't look into treatment, but into how the inheritance would be divided. My anger surpassed, I was simply dumbfounded. My husband seemed to feel the same way, and as our eyes met, he slowly nodded. This was the signal to continue with the plan. I once again said to Martha in a strong tone,
Martha, did you hear what I said? Mark is dead. I heard. What about it? Aren't you sad? Your own son passed away before you. You. Just make sure to send me some. I won't let you get away with not doing it.
With a click, the phone line was cut off and a dial tone echoed. I glanced at my husband and saw that he was shaking, his face red with anger.
Mark, are you okay?
As I asked, my husband looked into my eyes and said,
I'm cutting ties with her. She'll likely come here eventually, demanding money. Let's wait until then.
Okay. But are you really okay with this? Cutting off ties just like that?
Yeah. I have no regrets after that call. She's no mother.
My husband's eyes were filled with hatred. And I felt the same way. A person who only thinks about money over her own son's life is not a family to me. A few days later, as we expected, Martha came to our house. For the time being, I decided to hide my husband in the next room and deal with Martha myself. Then Martha approached me with a face like a demon.
Hey, give me Mark's inheritance right now. Again with that? Anything else to say? He's already dead, isn't he? It's pointless to say anything now. Yet, you never even visited him. What are you saying? Are you really his mother? You're so annoying. Give me the inheritance right away. I don't mind getting a lawyer.
Speaking more would be a waste of time. Just as I thought that, my husband emerged from the next room. Seeing him, Martha let out a startled gasp as if she had seen a ghost.
Mark! Why? Weren't you dead? Long time no see, Mom. Sorry, but the news about my death was a lie. Lie? How could you be so disrespectful? I wanted to confirm your true nature, Mom. I was curious about how you'd handle the allowance if I, your son, died. But you turned out to be a gold digger, just as I suspected. I got that perfectly. What? How dare you call your mother a gold digger? Silence. I'm cutting ties with a toxic parent like you.
Martha's mouth was agape at my husband's angry shouts. She could not come to terms with the fact that her own son was severing ties with her.
What does this mean, Mark? It means exactly what I said. I can't consider someone like you as my mother. No way. Then, what about the allowance? Do you really think I would? You're on your own with the debts. We're moving. Wait, please. If you do that, what about my living expenses?
Tearfully pleading, Martha reached out to my husband. He forcefully shook off her hand, looked at her coldly and said,
I don't care about your living expenses. You have been living off us without even a single apology. I really understand your despicable nature now. Don't you dare show up in front of us again. No. Wait, Mark. Are you going to abandon your mother?
Ignoring her words, my husband grabbed Martha's arm and dragged her to the front door. He threw her shoes and bag outside and chased Martha out of the house. Martha was making a fuss outside for a while, but disappeared after a bit, perhaps unable to withstand the eyes of the neighbors. She tried contacting us multiple times, but we ignored all of her attempts. We set Martha's number to be automatically rejected, and we finished moving. Regarding the matter of co-signing for the debts, it became invalid since Martha had made Mark the co-signer without his consent, and therefore he was not responsible. Without the allowance from us, Martha seems to be leading a miserable life. It's only natural, as she had been using the allowance for her gambling habits instead of paying off her debts. She still has a mountain of debts, and she is chased by debt collectors every day. She can't gamble anymore and seems to be working from dawn to dusk. For the foreseeable future, it's unlikely that she will be able to pay off her debts completely. She will have to keep working until she is unable to move. This is entirely her own doing. As for us, we are spending fulfilling days in our new home. My husband's condition has stabilized, and he has returned to work after some time. Now, there's a new life growing in my belly. We're going to have an additional member in our family next year. From now on, we want to spend happy days as a family of 3. The evidence is all in place. If charged, guilt is inescapable. One day, out of the blue, my husband, who despises dishonesty and is a stickler for integrity, was arrested as the perpetrator of a heinous crime. "This can't be happening," I demanded explanations, but was firmly told there was no mistake, my husband was the criminal.
Hey, why would you? You're denying the charges, right?
Even when I asked, my husband just hung his head in silence, not saying a word.
There's no way you could be the culprit, right? Right?
Despite my visits, he remained silent, reinforcing my fears. Amidst growing doubts about his innocence, our daughter astonishingly accused the police officer. "You're lying, officer. Do a proper investigation."
What the hell? He's the parent of a child with such a lousy mouth. He must be the culprit after all.
The accused officer, though dismissing it as a child's words, was visibly flustered. And, as it turned out, my daughter's accusation hit the mark, uncovering the unexpected real criminal. "My name is Mary. My husband, Tom, introduced by a friend, has always been clumsy yet kind and earnest. He can't help but assist anyone in trouble, regardless of his own haste. And, if he sees someone in the wrong, he confronts them without regard for personal loss, such is his nature. Even at work, he stands by his convictions, even if it means clashing with his superiors. Though it sometimes led to him being shunned or treated unfairly, I've always loved him for it." Years after marrying Tom, we had a daughter, Lisa. Tom adored Lisa beyond expectation, a stark contrast to his usual seriousness. We always had a full life, going to amusement parks and enjoying meals with our family of 3 on holidays, but in fact, we have one problem that we cannot confide in others very much. Since childhood, Lisa could see things others couldn't. "Hello, what's your name? Where do you live?" She'd often sit in a corner, conversing with an empty wall. For Lisa, this was normal. She frequently stared into space, spoke to an empty room, or waved at no one. Initially, we thought it was just pretend play, but it didn't fade as she grew. Just to be sure Lisa wasn't suffering from any neurological or mental disorders, we took her to the hospital, but the tests showed nothing abnormal. Tom suggested that maybe his family's background had something to do with it. Actually, my family has been known as spiritual readers in our hometown for generations. I remember my mom telling me that my late grandmother also had this mysterious ability to see things invisible to others. Maybe Lisa inherited that. I was skeptical about such a claim, half believing and half doubting that our daughter could have psychic abilities. However, I was soon to witness Lisa's astonishing ability myself. One day, while we were out shopping. "Next, we should go to, that store over there."
"Mom, stop, it's dangerous."
As we walked down the sidewalk, Lisa suddenly stopped. "Dangerous? What's wrong all of a sudden?" Lisa stood there, dead serious, refusing to move. Then, in the next moment, a car at full speed mounted the curb a few yards ahead of where we were. Had Lisa not stopped me, I would have walked right into the path of the accident. Phew, that was close. I suddenly had this image in my head of an old man driving that car, confusing the brake and the gas, and heading right towards us. Just like Lisa said, an elderly man emerged from the car, looking dazed but assisted by passers-by. Fortunately, no one was hit by the car, and the elderly driver seemed to have avoided serious injury. Faced with my daughter's precognitive words, I had to believe in her ability. When we got home and I told Tom about what had happened, even he was astonished by our daughter's gift. Our cute daughter, though we were surprised, neither of us found it creepy. We agreed to advise Lisa to keep her abilities to herself outside the family. While we see it as part of her uniqueness, it might appear bizarre to others. And could lead to unnecessary conflicts. Lisa obediently nodded in agreement with our advice. She continued to grow up without any problems. But lately, Tom has been coming home with a troubled look on his face. Even when I ask, he just smiles kindly and doesn't explain, making me worry that he might be having trouble with his boss again. Around the same time, I started encountering some creepy incidents myself. While walking around town, I felt like someone was following me or I'd hear the sound of a camera shutter from a distance. Neither Tom nor I could think of any reason why, but we feared it might be some stalker. Or could it possibly be that they were after our daughter? Even when we went to the police feeling like we were being watched, they said there was no actual harm and suggested it might just be paranoia. During these anxious days, my worst fears seemed to come true. As I went out to the balcony to hang laundry, I spotted a suspicious man peering in our direction from the road. Realizing he was spotted, the man quickly left the scene. This man was surveilling our family for some reason. I was convinced of that. Then, one day, Tom didn't come home as expected, and all my calls went unanswered. Worried that something had happened to him, I finally got a call from the police saying, "Your husband has been arrested on suspicion of robbery and murder." This can't be. I demanded explanations over the phone, but was met with firm assertions that Tom was the perpetrator. Taking Lisa with me, I rushed to the police station to see him, only to be bluntly told that visits were only allowed with a lawyer present. It was 2 days later before I finally understood the situation. According to the lawyer representing Tom, he had been near the scene of a recent crime in the neighborhood, his height and build matched the suspect's description, and a weapon was found in his bag, all of which led to his arrest. Of course, there's no way my husband would do such a thing. It must be a mistake. Surely, the real perpetrator will be found soon, and Tom will be released. Unable to do anything but wait at home with Lisa, I held on to the belief that my husband would return. A few days later, I was finally granted a visit to see Tom, with the lawyer present and Lisa by my side. However, Tom's demeanor was not what I had anticipated.
"Hey, why would you? You're denying the charges, right?"
Even when I asked, Tom just hung his head in silence, not uttering a single word.
"You couldn't possibly be the culprit, right? Right?"
His silence only fueled my anxiety, making me emotional. Still, Tom said nothing. Does this mean, could it actually be that Tom is the perpetrator? While I was becoming increasingly paranoid and confused, Lisa, who was sitting next to me, suddenly asked Tom a question in a calm voice. "Hey Dad, you didn't do anything bad, right? Then why are you here?" At Lisa's words, Tom looked up at her with a startled expression, his eyes seemingly trying to convey something. But when the officer standing behind Tom whispered something in his ear, Tom clammed up again. After the puzzling visit ended, I received an explanation about what would happen to Tom from Officer Turner, the officer in charge of the case. The evidence is all there. If charged, he won't escape guilt. Officer Turner said this with a smirk, offering a grim outlook. There's no way he could have done such a thing. Though I still believed that, the behavior of my husband during the visit and Officer Turner's confident statement left me uncertain about what the truth was. Wasn't your husband considered promising at his job? To think someone as quiet as him could commit such a heinous crime, you never really know. Officer Turner spoke with a mocking tone, gleefully babbling about how Tom's future was over. While listening, I realized something. Huh? Wait, have I seen this guy somewhere before? Looking at Officer Turner's face, it felt familiar. But with my head full of confusion about my husband's charges, I couldn't quite place it. Then, Lisa, who had been quietly listening beside me, made a startling accusation. "Mom, this officer, he's lying."
"What?" "Quiet, child."
I won't be quiet. Because the real culprit isn't Dad, it's this officer's brother. Lisa spoke with such certainty. It might sound like childish babble to anyone. But from past experiences, I knew there was truth in Lisa's words. Officer Turner looked visibly flustered by Lisa's accusation, but he yelled, accusing her of making irresponsible statements.
"What kind of parenting is this? If you keep up these lies, you might get arrested too."
When Turner made such a threatening remark towards Lisa, his colleagues around him looked shocked. "Hey, don't get worked up over a kid's comment. Yeah, what's gotten into you? Be careful, or you'll cause us all trouble."
"She's just a kid being disrespectful. Surely, that makes her parents guilty."
Despite his colleagues' attempts to calm him down, Turner's outburst didn't stop. But Lisa, undeterred, glared at Turner right in front of her.
Liar. Please, can someone check this officer's car?
Lisa yelled towards the surrounding officers. The officers looked puzzled but didn't take a child's words seriously enough to act.
I'm asking you too. Please, check as my daughter says.
Seeing Lisa's unusual insistence, I also appealed to the officers. If she's this adamant, maybe there's something that could clear my husband's name. With the lawyer's intervention, the officers reluctantly agreed to inspect Turner's car as Lisa suggested.
Hey, wait. Are you taking a kid's word for it?
It can't be helped, right? If we don't do something after all this fuss, it'll be more trouble later. It's just a formality, we won't find anything. Turner was desperately trying to stop his colleagues. His behavior was clearly suspicious. And just as Lisa had said, when the officers checked Turner's car, they found bloodstains under the passenger seat. Hey, what's this? It's not what it looks like. I got blood on it from a wound before, and it just stayed. No, the color looks quite fresh. Hey, call the forensics team. Finding the bloodstains made the officers serious. And soon, a crowd gathered for a more thorough investigation. See, I told you. The person behind him said to check the car. Lying is bad, and he should be held accountable for his sins. According to Lisa, something spiritual behind Turner had told her this.
I don't know anything about that. Someone's framing me. It's absurd that such a young child could pinpoint this. It's a conspiracy.
Turner desperately denied involvement in the crime, thrashing about, but his behavior only deepened the suspicion. Still, I've seen this guy somewhere before. Oh. As I watched Turner fumble through his excuses, I remembered a critical fact. You were the suspicious person surveilling our house. It makes sense I couldn't remember his name. He was nobody significant to me. The man who followed me and watched our house. His build and facial features, they're similar to Turner's. But the suspect always wore a hat pulled down and a mask covering his face. I can't say for sure it was him. But when I pointed him out as a potential suspect, Turner quickly turned his face away. And his hands, they were shaking, betraying his nervousness. Seeing that, I was certain it had to be him.
It has to be. And Turner, come to think of it, my husband's boss's name was also Turner.
It's a common surname, but Lisa said. His brother is the culprit. It couldn't just be a coincidence, so I told the officers about the stalker who resembled Turner and that my husband's boss shared the same surname as the officer. Turner did have a brother, right? Maybe we should check just in case. The officer hurried to gather information and investigated Turner's brother. And it turned out, Turner's brother was indeed Michael Turner, my husband's boss. It's too much of a coincidence. All right, let's go through everything again. Forensics arrived, and the blood found in Turner's car matched the victim's DNA. It also emerged that on the day of the incident, the victim was seen walking with Michael Turner, my husband's boss, on a convenience store's security camera near the scene. Damn it. I thought I could cover this up. That's why I hated getting involved in crimes. If only my brother hadn't caused this mess. Turner collapsed to the floor, frustrated. Further police investigation revealed that Michael Turner had a history of financial disputes with the victim. Michael had created a large debt to pay off his mistress, and had repeatedly borrowed money from the victim, but was finally forced to repay the loaned money and commit the crime. Michael quickly consulted his brother, a police officer, but fearing that a crime within the family would force him to resign, Officer Turner conceived a plan to frame someone else. And so, the Turner brothers chose my husband, Tom, as their scapegoat. Michael had been irked by Tom's defiance at work for some time. With my brother's help as a cop, we can pin anything on him, ruining his career prospects. 2 birds with 1 stone. That was the plan. Michael immediately set it into motion. First, he instructed his brother to stop Tom on his way home from work under the pretext of a routine check. What's this about? A heinous crime occurred in this area a few days ago. Since the perpetrator hasn't been caught yet, we're talking to passersby in a thorough search. Officer Turner cunningly deceived Tom, claiming to conduct a bag inspection under this pretext, and opened Tom's bag. While pretending to check the bag in the patrol car, he sneakily planted the weapon used by his brother Michael in the crime. Then, acting as if he had just found the weapon, Officer Turner immediately called for backup in the patrol car. A man walking near the crime scene was questioned, and a weapon was found in his possession.
Wait a minute, I don't know anything. I had no idea there was something like that in my bag.
Tom, not suspecting a police officer would frame him, fervently insisted on his innocence. Officer Turner, lying that he had connections to the underworld, threatened Tom with his family's safety if he didn't admit to the charges after being arrested. What? Why would a cop threaten me like that? You don't need to question that. Look at this photo, it's pretty clear, isn't it? Your lovely wife and daughter. Officer Turner confronted Tom with secretly taken photos of me and our daughter. He had stalked and photographed us beforehand to lend credibility to his lies. The threat using the photos was effective, and Tom had no choice but to comply. Eventually, other officers called by Officer Turner arrived, and Tom was restrained and taken to the police station. The Turner brothers had carefully planned to pin the crime on Tom, but their only miscalculation was Lisa's existence. They hadn't anticipated that her abilities would bring their crime to light. Incontrovertible evidence found in his car led to Officer Turner being arrested on the spot for concealing a criminal and fabricating evidence. Then, the police quickly moved to Michael Turner's location. Michael was also urgently arrested as the true perpetrator of the crime. Following the arrest of an active employee, the company, fearing a scandal, immediately fired Michael Turner. The Turner brothers faced severe penalties in court, receiving heavy sentences for their crimes. The issue of an active police officer attempting to shield a relative by framing an innocent man received significant media attention, leading to a public apology from police executives. Though the police apologized for the wrongful arrest, we remained distrustful, given how our pleas were initially ignored because of Officer Turner's scheme. It's all in the past now. Please make sure something like this wrongful arrest never happens again. Tom sternly told the police executives. It was only fair. Without Lisa's advice, Tom might have ended up with a real sentence. Given that, Tom's anger was justified. The police promised us they would conduct more careful investigations in the future and work to prevent wrongful arrests. We hope such a sad event never happens again. That was our wish. And even after the incident, we continued to have busy days due to sudden media interviews. Tom, with his strong sense of justice, spoke out about the police's sloppy investigation, which became a catalyst for future changes in how police conduct their investigations. When the media frenzy about the incident finally settled, we were able to regain our peaceful family life. I really caused a lot of worry and trouble for both Mary and Lisa. Thank you both. But I feel ashamed because, when you kept silent, I doubted you for a moment, thinking maybe you were the culprit. I knew it couldn't be true, I'm sorry. Even though I was flustered by my husband's demeanor, I was embarrassed that I had even slightly doubted him as the criminal. In that situation, it can't be helped. At that time, ensuring your safety was more important than clearing my doubts. That's why I couldn't resist when Turner threatened me. If only I had been stronger. But Tom didn't blame me. Instead, he apologized, saying he should have handled the situation better. Even when faced with being framed as the criminal, he was concerned about us, his family. Tom is that kind of person. Thank you for coming back to us, really. I'm so glad. Moved by Tom's words, I couldn't help but hug him tightly. If things had gone differently, he might not have returned to this home. I was just so happy he was safe. Oh, Mom and Dad are being lovey-dovey again. Grandma's laughing behind Dad, saying she's glad for us. Lisa pointed at us, teasing. No, she pointed behind Tom. According to Lisa, Tom always has his late grandmother as a guardian spirit around him. Thanks to Lisa's abilities, we were able to uncover the Turner brothers' crimes. The thought of what could have happened if we hadn't insisted on searching Turner's car, it's chilling.
Lisa, thank you so much. You and Grandma saved me,
Tom said, patting Lisa's head. Pleased with the praise, Lisa grinned happily. Whether Lisa's abilities will continue, we don't know. But with her power and her father's sense of justice to stand up to adults, we were able to return to our normal lives. Lisa's ability is a part of her uniqueness, and for our family, it's like a treasure. That's how I felt. Hey, why don't we go thank Grandma at her grave sometime soon? I suggested visiting the grave to express our gratitude for the ability Lisa inherited from Tom's grandmother.
Yeah. I will help clean the grave.
All right, let's all go say thank you by shining up Grandma's grave. Tom and Lisa both smiled and agreed with my suggestion. I look forward to continuing our life together, just the three of us, me, my husband, and our dear daughter with her mysterious powers. My name is Meg Smith. I'm a 38-year-old office worker. About 10 years ago, I got married, and now my family consists of my husband Ken, our son Grant, and myself, making us a family of 3. We're a couple who both work, but it seems that my husband and mother-in-law have always been displeased with this arrangement. Initially, they seemed to have assumed that I would quit my job once I got pregnant. However, I had no intention of doing so and have been actively working at the forefront after taking maternity leave.
Hey, Meg, when are you gonna stop working? You don't need to work so hard when I'm earning, right?
At first, Ken would chide me somewhat gently. But the words that slipped out of my mouth were the complete opposite of the response he was looking for.
Huh? I don't plan on quitting. I love my job. Plus, I've been saying since before we got married that I wouldn't quit my job, right? You agreed to that when you married me, didn't you?
When I retorted like this, Ken became silent and glared at me. At this point, I was starting to regret marrying him. He tried to persuade me by insisting there was no need for me to work since he was earning, but of course, that wasn't going to work. We were supposed to have thoroughly discussed and agreed upon both of us working before we got married. Yet, as soon as I gave birth, he started insisting that I should quit my job, become a housewife, and take care of the home, claiming it was the wife's duty. Really, he was insistent. However, I couldn't bring myself to consider divorce then, especially with our newborn son. The reason Ken started saying such things more frequently was something I had suspected. The presence of my mother-in-law. My house and my in-laws' house are only about a 10-minute walk away. The reason we live so close is because of the suggestion from Ken and my mother-in-law. Now that I think about it, that suggestion was probably so they could make my life miserable at their convenience.
What, you're still working? And there are days you come home later than Ken? Why don't you quit your job? It's sad for Ken to come home and not have his wife waiting for him.
Showing up at the house without any notice and starting a one-sided tirade is a frequent occurrence. My mother-in-law makes no effort to hide her adoration for her son, Ken. She's always bragging about him to the neighbors during chatting. Since she's like this with everyone, her personality is well known, and the neighbors look at me with sympathy. The only one who's kind to me is my father-in-law, who tells her, "You're embarrassing yourself, cut it out," but she just yells back, "What are you talking about?" My only son has been taken by that woman. I'm the one who should feel sorry, right? Whenever my mother-in-law causes trouble at our house, my father-in-law comes over with a peace offering. My son is fond of his grandfather but dislikes and avoids his grandmother. She seems sensitive to that, saying angrily, "That child isn't my grandchild. He doesn't warm up to me at all, isn't cute, and doesn't even look like Ken." Indeed, my son does resemble me more. He even says, "I'm glad I take after my mom." You can imagine what my son and I think of Ken and his mother. I'm at the point where I could divorce Ken anytime now. My son is now in upper elementary school. Growing up healthy and understands the unfair treatment I receive from my husband and mother-in-law. Plus, I'm the type to hold a grudge. Don't use pregnancy as an excuse to slack on the housework. You're not sick, so get your act together. Exactly. My morning sickness wasn't that bad. Are you just exaggerating? I've never forgotten how harshly they treated me during and immediately after my pregnancy. Since then, I've secretly carried a voice recorder to capture any verbal abuse from Ken and his mother. In addition to that. Hey, what's this? A camera? Oh, that. With things being unsafe these days, I've installed a security camera for protection. Yeah. Well, if it's your money, I guess it's fine. My husband brushed it off, but I installed surveillance cameras inside the house. The fact that he didn't question it much shows he really must not care anymore. The cameras have captured perfectly how my husband and his family have been treating me unfairly on a regular basis. I have almost no financial worries. For now, I pretend to rely on my husband's income because he makes a fuss, but it should be obvious that I don't need to, considering my job. Then, one decisive event happened. I can't take it anymore. Please, let's get a divorce. I pleaded, tears in my eyes, from the hospital bed. My husband and mother-in-law looked at me with a smirk. Remember, you're the one asking for it, got it? Take the kid with you, too. We don't want such a useless child anyway. I looked down, hiding my smile from their view. I knew what I had to do. I was determined to make them realize their mistakes. They would learn the meaning of karma and retribution. This story goes back about 2 weeks. My father-in-law passed away. It was a sudden death due to a heart attack. When I received the news from my mother-in-law, I was so shaken that I kept asking, "What do you mean?" over and over. My father-in-law, who was always proud of his good health. The same father-in-law who had promised to take my son out to play on his next day off. I was confused. But my mother-in-law, seemingly annoyed, said, "I don't know much either. He just suddenly died. You should take care of the funeral arrangements and everything. I'm leaving it all to you." My mother-in-law said it dismissively and hung up before I could reply. I was furious at her attitude, but more importantly, I hurried to arrange the funeral to properly send off my father-in-law. Of course, my husband didn't help at all. Instead, he kept talking about money, saying things like, "Dad's inheritance, huh? Wonder how much we'll get. I'm looking forward to it." Even my son looked at him with disdain. With both my mother-in-law and husband acting this way, it was a relief that the rest of the family was sympathetic and cooperative towards me and my late father-in-law. After the funeral, we opened my father-in-law's will with a lawyer present. The modest inheritance was to be distributed equally. My father-in-law, who always boasted about his health, had realistically prepared for the future with his will made in consultation with a lawyer. The will included provisions for me and my son to receive part of the inheritance. The amount was small, but that didn't matter. I was truly grateful for my father-in-law's thoughtfulness. However, that's when my mother-in-law and husband caused a scene. "What's this pittance? He must have saved up more. Why are we only getting this much?" Exactly. Normally, I, being the eldest son, should get the most, right? Hey Meg, Grant, you guys should hold back. Hand over any extra to me. Their remarks shocked the rest of the family. Amidst the disappointment and scornful looks, the two didn't stop their tirade. Eventually, the lawyer calmed things down, but my husband and mother-in-law still looked dissatisfied. I decided then and there, all right, it's time to divorce. Let's do it. Mom, Grandpa's gone, and there's no point being with Dad anymore, right? I think it's better if we divorce soon. My son said. It was shameful to make him say something like that. Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry for making you put up with so much. No, Mom. You've been putting up with a lot, right? It's okay, he's not my dad or grandma anymore. As I stroked my son's head, who spoke so decisively, I began to steadily prepare for the divorce. Today, about 2 weeks after my father-in-law's funeral, my mother-in-law called me over. Despite having a bad feeling about it, I went to my in-laws' house. I planned to tell them, I intend to divorce your son. My mother-in-law, settling heavily into the sofa, said right off the bat, we're going to start living together at our place immediately. That's the plan.
Excuse me? Live together?
Yes. Now that my husband is gone, it's tough being alone. It's a good opportunity, so Ken and I discussed it and decided we should live together.
I haven't heard anything about this.
Really? But it's already decided. Just accept it. Oh, and since we're going to be living together, I'll need you to quit your job and focus on taking care of the house. My mother-in-law smirked smugly, as if everything was going her way. Such shallowness. I was appalled. And I felt angry at my husband for proceeding with this living together plan without me, but then I thought, well, I'm going to divorce him anyway, so it doesn't matter. I stood up from the sofa and said, is that all you wanted to talk about? Then, if you'll excuse me. I have no intention of living with you at all.
What? Hey, wait a minute.
My mother-in-law grabbed my arm tightly as I tried to leave.
Let go of me, please.
I won't. You're definitely going to live with us. No, thank you. Besides, it's impossible. Because I'm planning to divorce your son.
What?
The moment I mentioned divorce, my mother-in-law's eyes widened in shock.
Divorce? I won't allow it. What complaints could you possibly have about my son? Wow. Stop, please. I have plenty of complaints. You both had plenty of complaints about me, too. It's the same thing.
I tried to argue back, but my mother-in-law, with strength belying her age, struck my shoulder. If she's this vigorous, she surely doesn't need someone to live with her.
I'm done with a daughter-in-law like you. Whoa!
Pushed with all her might, I stumbled. Wearing oversized slippers didn't help as my feet slipped out from under me. And then, I was falling towards the sharp corner of a piece of furniture. A nasty sound followed.
What?
My vision shook violently for a moment. Then, collapsing to the floor, I saw red drops falling. A dull pain arrived late, and I instinctively held my head. My hand was covered in blood. Ah, it seems I've cut my forehead. I feel dizzy.
No!
My mother-in-law, seeing me bleeding, turned pale and collapsed to the floor. Whose fault does she think this is?
Could you call an ambulance? Yeah.
Even though I asked, my mother-in-law was useless, just opening and closing her mouth. With no other choice, I grabbed the landline with my bloodied hand and called for an ambulance myself.
Yes, please.
After calling the ambulance, my strength drained away, and my consciousness started to blur. I could hear sirens in the distance. My memory of being in the ambulance afterwards is vague, but the cut on my forehead ended up needing several stitches. I was more shocked by the amount of blood than the pain of the injury, but the doctor said, "You're lucky you didn't pass out." If I had passed out, I probably would have been left there by my mother-in-law. Given the head injury, I had to stay in the hospital for a day of tests. When I called my son's school from the hospital phone, he showed up at the hospital, looking worried.
Mom, are you okay?
He must have rushed over, as his backpack was unfastened, flapping as he moved. The assistant teacher who brought my son from behind peeked in, and we nodded to each other in acknowledgement.
Sorry to worry you. I just bumped my head and got a cut, but I'm okay. Even with all that bandage wrapped around?
Yeah, it's quite wrapped up, isn't it? I guess it's to keep it stable, but it does seem a bit much. Trying to reassure my son, I smiled, but he scrunched up his face, looking like he was about to cry. Just as I reached out to comfort him, noisy footsteps approached. My husband and mother-in-law burst into the room, making a loud noise as they opened the door. My husband glanced at me on the bed and snorted. "Look at you, you seem fine. Making such a big deal over a little injury."
Big deal.
His tone was unbelievable for someone talking to his wife, let alone someone who's injured. Mom was so panicked, I thought something serious had happened. I left work early to come here. You should be grateful. Compared to you, Mom's had it worse. You making a spectacle of your injury has turned her pale. Yeah, it's all exaggerated. It's your fault for falling on your own. Oh, it's bad for my heart. What if I had a heart attack because of you? Despite the situation, my husband and mother-in-law continued to berate me, showing no signs of remorse or apology, blaming me relentlessly, even though it was clearly their fault, and my husband just took his mother's side without question. My son, the assistant teacher, and even the nurse who came in because of the noise were speechless. For a moment, I thought about playing the interactions with my mother-in-law recorded on my voice recorder at high volume, but I was in silence. What happened earlier made it clear. Even if I brought up divorce firmly, these people would never agree. Rather, I become stubborn, unsure of what they might do next. If I stay around them any longer, both my safety and my son's safety are at risk. When dealing with these kinds of people, it's best to play it cool. Act weak and pretend to seek mercy from the other side. Let them underestimate us and make their own mistakes. Luckily, they're simple and easy to manipulate. For our future, I'm going to do it. Why don't you talk back like you usually do? You're unusually quiet, my husband said as he leaned in to look at my face, then recoiled in surprise. Tears were in my eyes. Of course, fake crying. The tears, nearly spilling over, surprised not only my husband but also my mother-in-law and son. Given that I always showed a strong front. My voice was deliberately weak and frail as I said, "Please. I can't take it anymore. I want a divorce. Right now, I'm an actress. They need to see me as someone who's always been strong but finally broke down because of this incident. My rarely shown tears will seem all the more real to them." As expected, my sudden change shocked my husband and mother-in-law, but they soon wore smug smiles. A divorce? I heard it from Mom, but are you serious? Yes. I've tried my best, but I can't do it anymore. I can't be the perfect wife you want. I'm sorry it took me so long to realize. I've wasted 10 years of your life. Exactly. Finally realized your place, have you? So quick to get cocky. Such a predictable man. Yes, so please, let me leave. Please, just let me go. I emphasized that it was my inadequacy and concern for him that led me to choose divorce. I wondered what I would do if my mother-in-law pointed out the inconsistency in my attitude, but like a mother, like a son. She reacted just like my husband. Well, aren't you being obedient for once? But I guess that makes you a bit more likable. Ken, she's offering to step back, so that should settle it, right? After all, a woman like her isn't suited to be your wife. Just get the divorce over with. What they're saying now is the complete opposite of earlier. It's almost scary how easily they've been convinced. Glancing up at them, they were smiling triumphantly. Fine, I'll give you a divorce. But remember, you're the one asking for it. Yes, and take this grandson with you too. We don't want such an unlovable and useless child anyway. However, I have no intention of following their demands. But something my husband said caught my attention. What do you mean by that? Why do you insist so much? Well, my husband covered his mouth as if he realized his mistake. Behind my facade of a trembling expression, I was astounded at his carelessness. Absolutely, how careless can one be? He clearly looked guilty. My husband seemed hesitant at first, but quickly became defiant. I have a lover. I've been having an affair. But since you're asking for the divorce, there won't be any issue. Got it? My husband's dramatic declaration made me, my son, and the assistant teacher who was still present all roll our eyes, creating an awkward atmosphere. My mother-in-law, apparently unaware of the affair, was baffled. An affair? Though I had known about my husband's infidelity for a long time. My son had even seen him with his mistress, and of course, I had already investigated who she was, when they met, and how often they were meeting. An affair, really? I had no idea. However, for now, I choose to forget about that. I act as if I've just learned about my husband's affair and the existence of his mistress. Completely unaware. My son, knowing that I was aware of the affair, might find my current act a bit complicated, but he would understand that I was just performing. I subtly winked at my son. This charade will soon be over. Thank you. Since you've agreed to the divorce, I've already prepared the divorce papers. Please sign here, and once I'm discharged from the hospital, I'll pack my things and leave right away. I pulled out the divorce papers from my pants pocket and asked for my husband's signature. My husband signed the papers saying, "This means I'm finally rid of you." What a relief, or something to that effect. Make sure you leave our house quickly, or I'll throw out all your stuff. Yes, don't bother Ken anymore. After causing a huge scene, my husband and mother-in-law left the hospital room. I stopped my tears instantly and returned to a calm expression. Maybe I overdid it, but they seemed to have fallen for it, so that's good enough. Mom, that was amazing. My son tentatively started speaking. The assistant teacher behind him and I exchanged glances, and when I apologized for showing them something so bizarre, they surprisingly said, "No, that was incredible acting." I asked the assistant teacher to take my son home. He went ahead to pack his things. I wish my parents lived closer, but I have to take a flight to reach them. When I called them from the hospital phone to inform them about the divorce, they were first shocked, then told me I could come back home anytime. After the tests showed no abnormalities, I was cleared to go home immediately. When I arrived home, my husband had already left for work. I quickly packed my belongings and my son's, which he had already prepared, into the car and waited for him to return. I'm home. Mom, let's go quickly. Welcome back, Grant. Yeah, let's go. Checking that Grant had climbed into the car with his backpack on, I started the engine. On the way to our temporary home at an apartment, we stopped at the office to submit the divorce papers. The apartment, decently far from the house we lived in and my in-laws' home, was conveniently close to a station and seemed like a comfortable place to live. Taking a deep breath in the empty room, I psyched myself up for what's next. There's still something I need to do. Spread out in front of me are the photos proving my ex-husband's affair. Along with that, I have recordings from voice recorders and surveillance cameras saved on my computer. And documents regarding child support and asset division prepared with my lawyer. My ex-husband has another secret besides his affair. Hidden assets. From what I've managed to gather, they amount to several $100,000. He probably plans to live with his mistress on that money for a while. It's laughable how easily I found out, yet they were so smug about it. There's one more thing. I need to retrieve my belongings. I sent several documents to the house where my ex-husband lives. As expected, there was no contact from him by the time they should have arrived. Whether he's ignoring them after checking or hasn't bothered to look at them at all. I decided to wait. The following week, my ex-husband called.
Hey, Meg. It's you, right? Please, help me. Stop it.
His scream was so loud that I had to pull my smartphone away from my ear. I switched it to speaker mode and set it down on the table. He was still ranting on the other end. Seemingly in tears.
Please, Meg. You're the only one I can turn to now. Come pick me up immediately.
Excuse me, but you're being really loud. After I snapped at him, he fell silent, his screaming stopped. What's this all of a sudden? We're strangers now, aren't we? Oh right, did you check the documents I sent to your house? About child support and property division? That's not important right now, is it? It's my right to claim these things. Well, if you want to fight it, I'm ready.
No, please wait. I really can't deal with that right now. A burglar broke into my house and stole all the cash I had there.
Oh, is that so? The difference in our tones was astonishing. I had expected as much. I had already confirmed that my ex-husband, soon after our divorce, withdrew all his hidden assets and brought his mistress into the house. I also knew from gossiping with the neighbors that my mother-in-law bragged, "My son is so smart. He keeps a lot of money hidden from his wife. If she finds out, she'll take it all in the divorce. He even uses that money to treat us, such a good son." Kicking that useless wife out was the right decision. One should never underestimate the investigative skills of a detective agency or the speed at which gossip spreads among neighbors. Probably, the burglar acted on that information. The surveillance cameras at the house are still working fine, so I should be able to see the burglar. I'll submit the footage as evidence to the police. I told my ex-husband this matter-of-factly. He was speechless. "Where are you right now?" When I asked, my ex-husband stumbled over his words.
"Well, I'm actually at the police station."
"What's going on? I can't hear you very well."
"So, I reported that there was a break-in at my house, but somehow I ended up getting arrested too. They said I was reported for illegal entry into the house, which is ridiculous because it's my house."
"No, that house is mine. I reported it to the police."
"What?"
"Oh, did you forget? That house was purchased in my name, and I've been paying the mortgage. It's technically my house. You guys insisted on that, remember? I even have the audio of you saying so. Want to hear it?" "Yes, the house we lived in as a family is mine. The ownership and mortgage were put in my name because of some nonsensical claim that managing the house is the wife's duty. I never wanted to live near my in-laws in the first place. That was also a factor in considering the divorce. Over the years, my ex-husband seemed to have mistaken it for his house. I don't have any attachment to that house, but it sure helped teach my ex-husband a lesson this time.
It's only natural to report that my ex-husband is living in my house without permission, right?"
When I tilted my head as if he was saying something absurd, my ex-husband fell silent.
"Moreover, I'm planning to sell the house since I'm moving out. I've even gotten an estimate. Selling it should cover the mortgage." "What? You're selling it? What am I supposed to do then?"
"That's not my problem. Why don't you live with your beloved mother? Weren't you and your mother planning to live together anyway?" When faced with reality, my ex-husband fell silent, then came at me with a voice filled with tears and a plea that was frankly nauseating.
"Look, the only person I can rely on now is you. The mistress left me because I don't have money."
"I will do everything thoroughly. I'm the type to hold a grudge."
"Please, I'm begging you. I can't continue paying child support under these circumstances. We were husband and wife, after all. If you were my wife, you'd help me."
"What? Don't say such disgusting things. I have no pity or mercy for you. If you say you can't pay, then let's meet in court.
Goodbye."
I hung up the phone before my ex-husband could reply, feeling somewhat relieved. I guess I feel a bit relieved after all. After stretching a bit, having done what needed to be done, I felt a bit better. The following week, thanks to the evidence from the surveillance cameras I submitted, the burglar was arrested. However, the stolen money was already squandered on gambling. My ex-husband, thinking he could solve everything with money, got caught trying to embezzle company funds. Though he avoided jail time since it was an attempted embezzlement, he was fired from his job. Now, he's living on the edge, paying child support by doing day labor and covering the rest with loans. The house sold, he ended up moving in with his mother-in-law, but their relationship soured over this incident, leading to frequent loud arguments and police reports. The one concern I had was about my father-in-law's ashes, but thankfully, other relatives agreed to take care of them. After witnessing the commotion at the funeral, they'd had enough of my ex-husband and his mother. Out of concern for me, they also took care of the 49th day memorial service. I'm truly grateful for the kind people around me. My son and I moved to a new town. I received a promotion at just the right time and was assigned an important position at a branch office. What's more, my parents' house is now close by. We live freely, without interference from anyone. And once we're settled, my son and I plan to visit my father-in-law's grave.
"You're just a parasite living off of me. If you have a complaint, divorce me and get out." The beer he flung at me out of the blue, along with those words, left me stunned. Has he forgotten all that I had done till now? It's impossible for me to spend a lifetime with such a person. "All right," I said, and left the home that I had lived with my husband for many years. I couldn't possibly stand being called a parasite in silence. My name is Lisa Parker. I'm a 42-year-old housewife. My husband, Mark, is 4 years older than me at 46 and works for the local county office. We've been married for 12 years. We initially both worked, but I quit my job 5 years into our marriage. I actually wanted to continue working. I thought I'd have a child right after getting married, but I started feeling impatient as 2 years passed with no baby. I keenly felt the silent pressure from my in-laws who wanted to see their grandchild. When my mother-in-law finally said, "Is it because you're working that you can't have a child?" I decided to quit my job. I decided to focus on fertility treatments. Many people continue working while undergoing fertility treatments. But I've always had a weak constitution and was anxious about treatments while working. I remember Mark being happy when I quit my job and became a full-time housewife. He assured me that it would be easy to support me on his income alone. Despite quitting my job and becoming a housewife, we still don't have children. Mark was very supportive of the fertility treatments. We both love children and wanted to have one soon. I think I felt a little rushed when my in-laws said they wanted to see their grandchild soon. There was a tremendous struggle before I came to the understanding that having a child doesn't necessarily go according to plan. 5 years have passed since then, and we're no longer undergoing fertility treatments. We tried various things, but we were not blessed with a child. Both Mark and I have had thorough examinations. We thought there might be a problem with one of us. I've heard that many husbands are reluctant to get tested. That was not the case with Mark. I remember feeling relieved when he willingly took the tests. The results showed that we were both healthy and normal, so it seems to be a matter of luck. Also, my health was at its limit to continue the fertility treatments. When I told Mark that I was taking a break from the treatments, his reaction was more intense than I had imagined. "What are you talking about now? Do you know how much the treatments have cost us? Are you planning to continue being a housewife without even undergoing treatments?" He kept blaming me and kept bringing up the cost of treatments. Yes, I know the treatments were expensive and difficult. I felt guilty, and I covered most of the treatment costs with my savings from when I was single. Despite knowing that, Mark kept saying that his hard-earned money was being wasted. "Hold on, that's too harsh. You know my body's at its limit, don't you?" Mark, who only talks about money without any words of concern for his wife's body, finally got to me. That really got my goat. I couldn't help but retort back in a loud voice. "If that's the case, you shouldn't have suggested infertility treatments in the first place." I, who usually never talk back, opposed, and it seemed Mark didn't like that. Yet, he couldn't seem to strongly rebut me. Perhaps he was remembering that he too had agreed to fertility treatments. That day, he left the house and didn't return for quite a while. We had a few fights about the treatment afterward, but things have somehow recently settled down. Maybe Mark has given up on the idea of having a child. I feel guilty about that, but I think we just have to accept that it was our fate. Life as just a couple isn't bad. That's what I kept telling myself. My classmates who have kids seem to be having a hard time financially. Many of my friends continue to work to secure their children's future and their own old age. Mark never outright says it, but he seems unsatisfied with me quitting the treatment and becoming a housewife. After much thought, I decided to start a side job that I could do from home. Immediately, I told Mark about it when he came home from work. Mark laughed at my story as if it was a joke. If it were that easy to make money, nobody would go out to work. Starting with those words, he started to endlessly talk about how busy he is working during the day. Most of it was complaints about dealing with the public. Mark, whose main job is dealing with the public at the counter, seems to be under a lot of stress. "A job you can do from home? Well, at least make enough for my allowance. Not that I'm expecting much." Mark ended the conversation like that. I think Mark probably didn't understand even half of what I said. If he had understood, he wouldn't have reacted like that. I tried to explain again, but Mark was no longer listening. "Don't try to enjoy working from home, just go get a part-time job somewhere." As I tried to start speaking,
Mark turned a displeased face toward me. Mark somehow has the perception that he's the only one working. This won't do for a conversation. I decided in my heart not to talk about my side job until I can proudly tell Mark about the money I've earned. And so, I started a side job from home. Mark remains unchanged, not promoted, and always in the same department. It's rare for a public servant to be in the same department for over 3 years. It seems that he is thought to be unhelpful in other departments. Mark, who has been left behind while his peers are steadily being promoted, seems more stressed than ever, which I can tell. Firstly, the amount of alcohol he consumes at home has increased. Of course, the number of times he comes home drunk after drinking outside has also increased. Moreover, he always comes home completely drunk. And the next day, he would take the day off due to a hangover. This would surely affect his attendance record. On top of that, he didn't like me constantly on the computer even on my days off and had started going to the slot machines, something he had never done before. Sometimes he wins, but most of the time he loses. I once told Mark that it's a waste of money and suggested he find another hobby. Mark retorted, "What do you know?" before storming out. He returned late at night, thoroughly drunk. When I was called out to the front door in response to a loud call, the taxi driver was supporting Mark, who seemed unable to stand on his own due to his drunkenness. I dumped Mark in his room next to the entrance as he was. The taxi driver said apologetically, "I haven't received the fare yet." I planned to pay it from Mark's wallet, so I found his wallet and checked it. It was completely empty. He probably blew it all at the casino. In a hurry, I paid the taxi fare from my own wallet that I had left in the kitchen. I wonder what he would have done if I hadn't been home when he took a taxi home drunk and penniless. The next morning, Mark woke up with his usual hangover. He claimed to have no memory of the previous night. "You've been drinking too much lately. It's not good for your health, be careful." As I handed him a hangover remedy and water, Mark made a somewhat malicious expression. I braced myself for some sarcastic comment, but he said nothing. But I am certain that he harbors some dissatisfaction with my words deep down. Proof of that is that he has stopped making eye contact with me entirely. Despite it being a much-awaited weekend, Mark shuts himself in his bedroom due to his hangover. After finishing house chores, I sat down in front of my computer to do my work. Public servants have a 2-day weekend. I decided to be lenient and let him enjoy his heavy drinking on a Saturday. With these thoughts in mind, I start my work. At first, I was worried about Mark, but as I focused on my work, I completely forgot about him. Time flies when you're focused. Before I knew it, it was Sunday evening. Mark's hangover was severe, and he was unable to eat lunch. As night approaches, he seems to be somewhat back to his usual condition. I was focused on my work until Mark, who spent his day off lounging in bed, called out, "Dinner." "Huh? Is it that time already?" I didn't notice because I was so focused. Startled by Mark's voice, I checked the clock on the wall. It was almost 7 p.m. "Hurry up, I'm hungry." Mark, leaning on the entrance door with his arms crossed, looked disgruntled. Indeed, I had completely forgotten about dinner, that was my mistake. Feeling sorry, I left my computer. I hadn't done any shopping, so I had to make dinner with what was left in the refrigerator. I prepared dinner in a hurry. While I was busily preparing dinner in the kitchen, Mark was sprawled out on the living room sofa, doing nothing. From time to time, he called out, "Isn't it ready yet?" "It'll be ready soon, sorry. Please wait a bit." "You're slow, hurry up. You're a stay-at-home wife, and you can't even do this right." As Mark continued to complain while lying around, I gradually became irritated. If he was so hungry, he could at least help a little. I felt my remorse gradually changing into resentment towards Mark. My movements as I prepared dinner became rougher. He must have heard the sounds in the living room. I heard a sharp tisk from the living room. Because of all this, the atmosphere at dinner was terrible. Watching Mark eat his meal in silence with a sullen face, I felt fed up. It must have shown on my face. Suddenly, Mark splashed the beer he was drinking at me. Caught off guard by the cold beer in my face, I was momentarily stunned. The beer was chilled and I certainly hadn't expected such an action from Mark. Beer was dripping from my chin. "If you have a problem living off my hard work, you parasite, then get a divorce and get out." His face, flushed red, probably from the alcohol, was shouting at me, still stunned. He kept grumbling even after his outburst. "A parasite?
You think of me as a parasite? I asked Mark, looking straight at him. It upset me more to be called a parasite than having beer thrown at me. I need him to correct those words and apologized no matter what. At my thoughts, Mark snorted in derision. Don't feel like you're working just because you do a little side job for pocket money. You're not working, you're spending all of my earnings and savings on infertility treatments, and even after all that, we don't have a child. You stopped the treatment because you were feeling unwell and remain a housewife. Mark began his usual rant about how much stress he's under from work. Indeed, being a public service clerk likely involved a lot of complaints. I empathize with that, but it was Mark who chose this job. He should simply do his job without constantly complaining about it. If we were both working, my hardships would have been less. I might have quit this job I hate. I'm working and enduring for your sake. Mark was blaming me for all the stress from his work. I was truly taken aback. I don't remember him being like this. Maybe his personality changed as he watched his peers climb up the career ladder. Seeing me listening silently, Mark smirked unpleasantly. He seemed to mistake my silence for my inability to argue back. Truthfully, I was just too astounded to speak. If you have complaints, then let's divorce. Mark repeated the word divorce again. Does he think that mentioning divorce will make me reflect on my actions and apologize? Understood. I replied calmly. I had nothing else to say to Mark. If he wants to make a fuss about divorce, then let's divorce. Determined, I wiped the beer off with a towel that was nearby. It was sticky and uncomfortable. I'll leave. I got up and opened the drawer where I keep my important belongings. In there was a divorce paper that we had written together as a precaution to stay close to each other when we first got married. I never thought we would have to use it. The divorce paper already has both of our signatures. We just need to fill in the date and submit it. Mark, remember this? The divorce paper we wrote when we first got married. It's a pity that we have to use it. I opened the divorce paper in front of Mark to show him. Mark seemed to have completely forgotten the existence of the divorce papers, his eyes wavering a bit in shock. My affection for him cooled immediately, making me think he wasn't really serious about the word divorce. I was so mad at myself for not seeing that he was such a small-minded man. I neatly folded the divorce papers and tucked them into my pocket. Hurry up and get a lawyer to process this. I'll feel refreshed once I get rid of this parasite. Get it over with quickly. I finished my dinner and left the dining table as it was. I returned to my room, quickly packing only what I needed into my bag. Mark was still drinking beer in the dining room, but I decided to leave the house without saying a word to him. Honestly, I didn't want to see Mark's face anymore. I boarded the train and returned to my parents' house. My parents' home is about an hour and a half away by train. My mother looked surprised to see me come home without any notice, but she seemed to sense something was wrong by my demeanor. I'm home. When I said that in a small voice, my mother warmly welcomed me with welcome back. Whether it was the relief from hearing my mother's voice, I don't know, but I ended up sitting down right at the front door. My father, wondering what was going on, also showed his face at the entrance. Seeing me sitting down at the entrance, he seemed to sense something was wrong as well. And so, I returned to the comfort of my parents' home. Once I had calmed down a bit, I told my parents what had happened tonight. My parents, who knew that I, who had been frail since I was a child, had been working hard on infertility treatments, were beyond angry and flabbergasted at Mark's lack of consideration. When I finally told them that I was called a parasite, my father slammed his teacup down on the table. The noise was so loud that both my mother and I were startled. Looking at me, my father said quietly, "Fight this through to the end." The next morning, I contacted a lawyer. I went straight to the lawyer's office. My marriage to Mark will be over soon. After visiting the lawyer's office, on the way home, I passed by the town hall where my husband works. There was Mark. As I thought about our life as a married couple, there weren't many good memories. Thinking it couldn't be, I thought back to our newlywed life with Mark, but indeed, there were no wonderful memories. I was convinced in my mind that we divorced because we were meant to divorce. While Mark was at work, I returned to the house where we had been living together and quickly moved out my belongings. It would be impossible for me to do it alone, so I asked my father and brother to lend me a car. Thinking that some heavy lifting would be necessary, even my cousins who lived nearby came to help. At this time, all the men in my family unanimously said,
we thought you would divorce. Even my brother had said he didn't like Mark from the time of the wedding.
Why didn't you oppose my marriage then?
I couldn't help but blurt it out. My father and brothers laughed out loud at my words. Apparently, they had opposed it, and I had just forgotten. Just like the saying love is blind, I was infatuated with Mark before our marriage. Opposing opinions probably didn't reach me. I felt a little embarrassed, realizing that memory is something that can be overwritten to suit one's convenience. After removing the necessary items, I wrote a letter to Mark. I left a note stating that my lawyer is processing the divorce, and that I had already moved out my belongings, so he could do as he pleased with the rest. I tried to think of something nice to add, but nothing came to mind. Finishing the letter brought me an incredible sense of relief, to the point where I was surprised at myself. The moment I locked the front door and threw the keys into the mailbox, I felt like dancing. I realized that my marriage to Mark had been a continual exercise in patience. I had braced myself for Mark's immediate contact, but there was none on the day I moved out, or the day after. Then, 3 days after I left the house, I spent the day shopping with my mother for the first time in a long while. It was partly a change of pace, but I also wanted to thank my mother who had accepted me back home without saying anything. As it was nearly Father's Day, I decided to pick out a gift for my father with her. After enjoying the shopping, we returned home a bit past 6 p.m. I had unintentionally left my cell phone at home, and I hurriedly checked it when I got back. There were a terrifying number of calls and emails from Mark. Among Mark's calls, there were also calls from a friend. He's probably asking around my friends for my whereabouts. I felt sorry for the trouble I had caused my friends. As I was wondering whether or not to contact Mark, my phone buzzed, notifying me of an incoming call. When I checked the screen, it was Mark calling. I knew I couldn't keep running away forever, so I decided to pick up.
Lisa, where are you? Things are really bad.
The moment I answered the phone, Mark's yelling filled my ears. He sounded very frantic, and I couldn't make out the words he was blurting out.
Huh? What? I've already submitted the divorce papers. We're practically strangers now. I don't know what's so bad, but it doesn't concern me, does it?
I deliberately spoke slowly. I hoped that it would further irritate Mark. My provocation easily riled up Mark.
You just went and hired a lawyer on your own.
He made it sound like I had done everything on my own, even though he was the one who had initiated the divorce. This really got on my nerves.
Hold on a minute, remember, you were the one who wanted a divorce, right, Mark? Feeling liberated now that the parasite is gone, are we? Oh, did you realize that maybe you're the parasite?
At my words, I could hear Mark catching his breath on the other end of the line. I had expected the call would come soon.
Did you think I didn't know about your debt?
Actually, Mark had a debt. It was a debt he had accumulated from gambling. It was about 5 years ago when I found out that he was deeply in debt from casino and boat racing. Mark's excuse was terrible. He seemed to think that since I was spending money on infertility treatments, he should be able to spend as well. I remember being confused when he told me that. In the end, we promised to repay this debt together. Mark, who had cried and promised never to gamble again, continued to do so, and I knew it.
Did you think you could repay your debt and live a normal life on just the living expenses you give me?
Mark was silent on the other end of the line. Mark used to hand over the living expenses from his salary to me, and he was free to use the rest as he wished. At first, he would give me the money to repay his debts separately from the living expenses, but eventually, the debt repayment money stopped being included in the living expenses envelope. He had fallen into gambling.
Let me guess, you've been borrowing money from your family to repay the debts, haven't you? Are you mooching off them too?
Mark spat out with as much sarcasm as he could muster. He seemed to think that I was borrowing money from my family to meet the monthly debt repayments. He even seemed to know that the money he was giving me wasn't enough to repay the debt.
I haven't borrowed a single penny from my family. I've been repaying your debts with the money I earned from my side job. But now that we are strangers, I don't have any obligation to repay your debts. Did you really think that you could live a normal life while repaying debts with your salary alone?
Mark must have called because he'd been contacted by his creditor. The money he borrowed wasn't from a particularly reputable source. He borrowed from banks, maxed out his credit cards, and ended up in debt to financial companies. There was some debt collection involved. It seems they contacted his workplace.
He was panicking. So, it's not me who is the parasite. You were my parasite, Mark. Stop lying. You can't possibly have made that much money from a woman's work-at-home job. Stop showing off. Just go borrow some money from your family and pay it back. Mark was always looking down on me. I couldn't help but sigh in disbelief. My side job is affiliate marketing. You could look it up on the internet. If you try a bit, you can easily out-earn your salary. I wonder why you didn't realize this when I was no longer dependent on you, especially since you are a public servant. The truth is, the side job I chose was quite profitable. I won't say that anyone can make money from it. How much you earn probably varies from person to person. But my strategy, based on the skills and experience I gained while working in a major corporation's marketing team, was a huge success. Well, that's how it is. I said that and hung up the phone. Mark tried to say something, but I didn't feel like listening to the end. It would probably be something like, pay for me, or I need a loan. Hanging up the phone made me feel like I'd really severed ties with Mark. He probably had other debts that I'd been repaying, and maybe even new ones he'd taken on. Well, it's none of my business anymore. After that, Mark kept calling me for several days. He seems to have come to my family home when I was out, but my father sent him away. At that time, he reportedly said, "I want you to lend me some money." Just how greedy can he be? To think I used the money I earned to repay his debts. It was ridiculous. He should have relied on his parents, but apparently, he'd already done so. He'd borrowed a large amount from his in-laws, and had been disowned without my knowledge. I did feel a distance growing between us and his parents at one point. Mark had told me that his brother and his wife had moved in with them, so they were keeping their distance to avoid being a nuisance, but that must have been a lie. Unable to rely on his own family, he kept borrowing money to repay his debts. I always figured he'd eventually go bankrupt, but it came about surprisingly soon. In the end, he seems to have borrowed money from loan sharks, and even the city hall was hit by debt collectors. There were also harassing phone calls that caused the city hall's phone lines to go crazy, causing a big problem. Eventually, rumors spread, and Mark lost his place at work and resigned. I heard rumors that he is now unemployed and on the run from debt collectors. He has become less than a parasite now, more like scum. Having moved back to my family home, I decided to stay there. We're renovating the slightly old family home, and my mother is putting her heart into creating an English garden she's always longed for. My affiliate marketing is going well, and I'm not short of money. Most of all, I'm happy that I can spend the money I've earned on my own. Once the English garden is complete, I'm thinking of opening a cafe.
So, it's on you to pay back the debt, he said.
Out of the blue, my husband dumped his debts on me and vanished. No matter how many times I tried to reach out to him, I couldn't get through.
What should I do? I can't possibly pay off such a large amount.
But there were people who rescued me when I was at my wit's end.
Mom, we'll be okay.
The one who said this was my daughter. My name is Karen Sullivan, 35 years old. I'm a working mother living with my husband, John. John and I met at a mixer, which we attended as fill-ins. I was nervous, but John took the initiative to strike up a conversation and we quickly became friendly, exchanging contact information. After that, we kept in touch, gradually growing closer. And we started dating. I couldn't believe that I ended up dating a guy I met at a mixer. When I first started dating him, I told my sister, Lisa, about John. Lisa laughed and said, "I can't believe you're dating a guy you met at a mixer. I thought you would date someone from your workplace since you're so quiet." I've never been the outgoing type, and even after I became old enough to drink, I didn't attend social drinking parties with coworkers or friends.
I was surprised too, I replied. You were just there to make up the numbers, weren't you? She teased. Yes, I admitted.
When I showed her a photo of John, she was pleasantly surprised, saying, "He's unexpectedly handsome." After that, we caught up on each other's lives for a bit before parting ways. Lisa is single with no boyfriend. She seems to prefer being alone because it's easier, and has absolutely no interest in getting married or having a boyfriend. Though I understood her perspective, my thoughts were consumed with envisioning a future with John.
Just imagine, if our relationship continues to go well, we get married, and have a child, how happy would I be? On my way home after talking with Lisa, I found myself smiling unconsciously. A few years later, John and I were happily married. I remember how I burst into tears when he proposed. We rented a new apartment and started our life together. We had never lived together before, so being able to spend the entire day with John felt like a dream. Although we both worked full-time and our schedules were mismatched, we made time to eat together and sleep side by side. We made a conscious effort to spend as much time together as possible. We had the same days off, so we would either lounge around at home or go for drives. Every day was filled with joy. Then, a significant change came into our lives. We had a baby. I will never forget the moment our little girl was born. She was so tiny, fitting perfectly in my arms. So, this is what happiness feels like. Our families celebrated with us in full swing. We named our baby girl, who had blessed us with her arrival, Susie. Before Susie was born, I had quit my job and was putting my all into my role as a full-time housewife, juggling household chores and childcare. Even though he should have been tired from work, my husband, John, would take over the chores and the childcare. "I'll take care of Susie. You go ahead and rest," he would say. "All right, thank you," I'd respond. I was glad I had married John. But, years later, I would come to realize that my thinking had been a mistake. A few years after Susie was born, John suddenly quit his job. He explained to stunned me why he had quit. Apparently, he had been feeling stressed due to not getting along with his new boss. But, that doesn't mean he shouldn't have consulted with me. Sure, if my husband is struggling, quitting is an option. But, we are a family now, barely managing our finances with John's income, so he could at least have discussed it with me a bit.
What on earth? You're quitting out of the blue? Did you find another job? I asked.
No need to worry. I've thought about it, he replied vaguely. His answer wasn't very reassuring. I had nothing but anxiety, but I had no choice but to trust John. Soon after, John found a new job. That was a relief. I could have gone out to work too, but Susie was still very young, so I wasn't keen on that idea. I wanted to watch Susie grow a little bit more. "How's the new job? Can you handle it?" I asked him. It's all right," he answered. "Did something happen at the company again? Like, you didn't get along with your boss or your colleagues?" "Relax, it's all good. Here, I'll take care of Susie." "Go take a bath," he suggested. "Really? All right, thank you." Something seemed off. But I thought it would be too persistent to keep asking, so I left Susie with him and went to take a bath. A few days later, John came home with a gloomy expression. I tried to ask him what had happened, but a familiar feeling came back to me. Yes, it was when John had suddenly quit his job. Had he quit again? I hoped that my hunch was wrong. But that hope was quickly shattered. "I quit my job," he announced.
Why?
I asked. "I just couldn't get along with the people there. They kept bossing me around. Can you believe it, being ordered around by people years younger than me? I just can't stand it," he explained. "I see. Well, we can look for another job, right? I can help too," I offered. Suddenly, John's face turned scary. And he yelled at me. "What's with that look? You're not happy that I quit my job? You're living off my money, after all. How dare you talk down to me while you're just a housewife?" With that, he threw his bag onto the living room couch. "Hey! Shut up!" John ruffled his hair, took out a bottle of alcohol from the fridge, and guzzled it down as if to get rid of his irritation. I had never seen John like this before. At the same time, an indescribable fear came over me. I didn't mean to talk down to him at all, and I had offered to help. John seemed very frustrated, and after showering me with a slew of angry words, he plunked himself down on the couch. I was left wondering what had happened, just listening to John. Perhaps it started from that day, the rift between me and John. From then on, John started a cycle of quitting jobs, never staying for long. Unable to secure a stable income, we had to scrape by.
Hey, isn't it about time you settled down with a job? I said.
Initially, I refrained from nagging, considering John's feelings, but as things were getting out of hand, I couldn't help but speak up.
Enough with your nagging. If you want money, you can earn it. Don't rely on me too much, he retorted. But what about Susie? I questioned. I don't care, he responded.
By then, John seemed to have lost interest in Susie, treating her like a burden. He was so happy when Susie was born, but now he seemed like a completely different person. No matter how much I pleaded, John would not hold down a job. After much thought, I decided to leave Susie with my friend Lisa and start working myself.
I'm sorry for dumping this on you, I apologized. It's totally fine. Susie and I will have fun together, Lisa reassured me. Thank you, I said.
Susie was only just starting kindergarten, but I wasn't too worried. Not only because I was leaving her with Lisa, but also because Susie seemed mature for her age. She could read newspapers, and she could write stories using simple words. Her personality was also quiet and somewhat detached. At first, I was honestly anxious. Would she make friends in the future? Could she properly interact with others besides me? But I found that I didn't need to worry, it seemed like she had made friends. As a parent, I was very relieved. With all this in mind, I decided it would be okay for me to start working. Surprisingly, I found a job quite easily. Thus, I began working full-time. The salary was quite good. Even if John quit his job again, I could support the family. It was tough, but the colleagues were kind, and I was able to work joyfully each day. A few years after I started working, John finally began to work seriously. Maybe he found a stable workplace. Just knowing that gave me some peace of mind. At the same time, I felt John's mood gradually improving. It was as if he had returned to the John the first knew when we got married. Being full-time, he started caring for me, asking, "Are you okay? Aren't you tired?" His personality change was so drastic, it was puzzling. But with his work situation stabilizing, I thought perhaps he was feeling more at ease, and I felt a bit relieved. Susie was also growing healthily. Around this time, John became kind to Susie again, playing with her as a father should. Susie seemed to enjoy playing with John, which made me smile. But still, I was scared to quit my job. So, I continued to rely on Lisa.
How's Susie? Does Susie seem lonely? She's super happy, Lisa responded.
As long as Susie was happy, that was enough. I breathed a sigh of relief, thinking I needed to treat Lisa to dinner since I'd be depending on her from now on. A few years later, Susie, now in 3rd grade, seemed to be enjoying her everyday school life. Our family relationships seemed to be as good as they once were. It made me wonder what that period when John and I were clashing was all about. We were doing well as a family. Then, during a conversation with John, he made a suggestion. "How about we get a new car?" "A car?" "Yeah, I mean the one we have is okay, but I think it's time for a change. You know, it's hard to keep up with the maintenance, and there's the annual inspection." Indeed, the car we were currently using was something we bought a few years back. Each time the car inspection rolled around, the number of problems seemed to increase, and the repair costs were a concern.
"Yeah, it might be time." "I knew you'd say that. Karen, I've already got some brochures."
Already? Thank you. I never knew he was so keen on getting a new car. With a little bit of confusion, I started going through the brochures with John.
"Susie, come here. What kind of car do you want to ride in?"
John called Susie, and we all ended up flipping through the car brochures together. But I never imagined that this very act of John's would be the beginning of a tragedy. A few months later, we finally decided on a car and had it delivered. It was a new car costing just over $20,000. The car loan was in my name. Normally, it would be in John's name, but his job history was unstable, and I was worried that he wouldn't pass the credit check. From now on, I decided to work even harder to repay the loan. John must be feeling the same way, I thought. Despite my assumptions, my thoughts turned out to be greatly mistaken. Unbelievably, John stopped coming home. He disappeared somewhere with the newly bought car. Could it be that John had been involved in some incident? I didn't know what to do. During my confusion, I got a phone call. It was from John.
Hello, John. Where are you now?
I was so worried that I raised my voice without realizing it.
Hey, don't raise your voice so much. But you suddenly disappeared. And the car is gone too. I was worried whether you had run away or gotten involved in an incident.
I desperately explained how worried I was about John. However, John just laughed off my concerns and revealed a shocking truth.
Actually, I've fallen in love with another woman. I love her more than you. What? What do you mean? I mean exactly what I said. I've found someone I love more than you. I've hired a lawyer and started the divorce proceedings, so don't interfere with me anymore.
Divorce? That's too sudden.
Oh, and I have some debts. Take care of them for me, will you? Debts. How much? Maybe around $300,000? You're gonna take care of it, right?
With that, John abruptly hung up. Could this really be happening? All those smiles he had shown me up to this point, were they all lies? I felt drained as I pondered the thought.
Mom, are you okay?
Susie softly rubbed my back as I collapsed onto the floor.
Yes, I'm okay. Thank you.
Though I said I was okay, I was obviously far from fine. Would I have to carry a large debt from now on? $300,000 was an astronomical amount. Moreover, the car payments were still in my name. In a sudden realization, I began to search for my bank book. I looked everywhere I could think of, the shelves, cupboards, counters, and lockers, but it was nowhere to be found. My debit card were also missing. I opened the banking app on my smartphone. My balance had decreased. I had no recollection of withdrawing the money. John was the only one who came to mind. But I couldn't reach out to John no matter how hard I tried. It's no use. I was at a loss. But right now, I needed to focus on making money. There was no time for worrying. With that in mind, I concentrated on my work. I didn't say anything to Lisa as I didn't want to burden her with my worries. Of course, I didn't tell Susie either. A few weeks after John had fled, I blacked out at work. When I woke up, I was in the hospital.
Huh? Karen? Are you okay? Sis.
Susie was standing next to Lisa. Apparently, I had collapsed due to excessive stress. Now, I had to stay in the hospital for a few days for extensive tests.
Going to stay in the hospital? Once you're out, we need to talk about John. I know everything from Susie. From Susie? You mean you knew everything? Yes. I overheard your call with Dad.
I couldn't believe Susie had known all along. I was a bit depressed, thinking I'd get scolded by Lisa once I got out. The next day, the tests began. To my shock, they found cancer in my body. It wasn't advanced, and they said it would improve considerably with surgery, so I had the operation. After that, I was discharged, which was good, but I was not fit enough to work for a while. I had no savings, no income. On top of that, I had to pay for the surgery and hospitalization. That's when Lisa and Susie came to my aid. Susie had explained to Lisa in detail about my situation and what John had done. Hearing this, Lisa was furious. She decided to do whatever it took to find John and make him pay for the debts and damages. But I didn't know where John was. How are we supposed to know where John is? How are we supposed to claim anything? That's when Lisa made a suggestion. John had a car registered under Karen's name, didn't he? Since it's technically Karen's property, why don't you try to retrieve it first? Can I really do that? As I expressed my doubts, Lisa made a surprising comment. Actually, I found out where John works. Apparently, John worked at a company located in the same building as Lisa's. Although Lisa primarily works remotely, she occasionally sees him when she goes into the office. Well then, go to John's place immediately. I was ready to head to John's place immediately. I feared if we didn't act soon, he might disappear somewhere. However, Lisa stopped me.
It's reckless to go there without any plan. I have a good idea. Or rather, Susie and I do. Hey!
A plan? Lisa and Susie exchanged glances. I had no idea what they were thinking. As I watched them in a daze, Susie broke into a wide smile. Don't worry. We have a plan. What could they be plotting? Even when I tried to ask, they wouldn't tell me. However, a month later, I found out what Lisa and Susie had done. While I was at Lisa's house, a call came in from a certain individual. When I checked my phone, it was John. I ignored the first call, but he kept calling relentlessly. I wonder what he wanted. Tentatively answering the call, I heard John shouting in panic.
Hey, help me!
What are you talking about?
Just come! If things stay like this, I'll get arrested.
And with that, John blurted out his location and hung up. Lisa and Susie, who had heard the conversation, finally spilled the beans.
Actually, we reported the car as stolen. And it was Susie who came up with this plan. Brilliant, right?
Susie blushed shyly. I thanked Lisa and Susie and headed to where John was. The location was a park relatively close to our house. John was surrounded by police officers. They were probably questioning him. We went to John's location. We then explained the situation to the police officers and asked them to leave. After that, John ushered us into his car to talk. Inside, there was a stern-looking woman with crossed legs sitting in the passenger seat. The woman kept glaring at us.
Man, I'm glad you guys came. But why did the cops show up at my place?
John seemed oblivious to what the police had told him, which made me sigh.
Well, because we reported the car as stolen. It's my property, after all. What?
John and I are already divorced. Right now, he was technically driving someone else's car. It was only natural that a stolen car report would be filed. I guess he never expected something like this to happen. As John was stunned, Susie hit him with another blow.
Hey, why did you leave us? Why did you borrow money and never pay it back? Why?
John heaved a sigh of exasperation. However, he did not initiate any conversation.
You planning on staying silent? Well, if you keep this up, I'm gonna call the cops. You do realize you've already committed a crime by using my name without my consent, right?
Hearing this, John began to talk hesitantly. The name of the woman he was cheating with is Linda. It seemed she had just joined the company where John is currently working. They became close at the welcome party and ended up in a romantic relationship. And apparently, about 3 months ago, he got her pregnant. Indeed, Linda's belly was showing.
So, that's why you abandoned us, I said. Abandoned is such a harsh word, he replied. But it's the truth, isn't it? I countered.
John looked taken aback as Lisa suddenly chimed in. Watching his reaction, Lisa pressed on with the conversation. Next, Lisa started lecturing John about his past behavior. How he dumped his debts onto others, his attitude towards the family, his habit of quitting jobs quickly, and his tendency to shout at the slightest provocation. Whether John was remorseful or not, he kept his head down in silence. Linda seemed to be getting increasingly irritated at John's silence. I tried to ask about the reason for the debt, but he wouldn't tell me anything. At that moment, Linda, losing patience, blurted out a shocking revelation.
This guy took out loans in his wife's name, and he bought me loads of designer stuff. He's really the best.
It seems he incurred a debt of about $300,000 just to lavish Linda with gifts. What on earth did he buy to rack up such a huge debt? From the looks of it, He must have bought multiple items worth tens of thousands each. I was utterly dumbfounded. But what intrigued me was why Linda had disclosed the reason for the debt. If she was in cahoots with John, revealing this information would only put them at a disadvantage. As I was contemplating this, Susie asked Linda a question.
Hey, your belly's pretty big. Is it a baby? When are you due?
Maybe in about 3 months? Linda replied. Due in 3 months, that clearly didn't add up. If she got pregnant 3 months ago, she'd still have a long way to go before giving birth. Lisa also seemed to have the same thought and started questioning Linda.
Are you sure the baby is John's? There's no way it's due in 3 months. Whose child is it?
Lisa was even more direct in her questioning than I had expected. I was shocked, but it seemed that Linda had decided to spill the beans here.
Exactly. The baby isn't John's. I was actually considering keeping it a secret, but I figured it might turn into trouble if I got further involved with him. So, I just told you all, Linda confessed.
Why did you tell us about the debt?
I asked. Yes. I guess I'm done with John, Linda said,
laughing crudely. Just being in this hellish scene made me sick. John looked at Linda, disbelief etched on his face.
What do you mean by that? John shouted. Well, it means exactly what it sounds like, Linda retorted.
The spat between John and Linda had turned the already hellish atmosphere even worse. However, Lisa broke the tension.
I'm calling the police, she said nonchalantly. What? Why? Linda exclaimed. Both of you aren't listening to what we're saying. And in case you've forgotten, using Karen's name to get into debt is a crime. And John, driving her car without permission is a crime too. As far as we're concerned, you and Karen are strangers now, Lisa explained.
With that, Lisa told me to call the police. John and Linda tried desperately to stop me, but I brushed them off and continued with the call. A few minutes later, the flashing lights of a police car could be seen. This was the way to make them pay for their sins. The debt and the car issues, they'd have to figure it out. I felt relieved. Afterward, both John and Linda were held accountable for their actions. Neither of them received probation nor were they sent to prison, but they were ordered to pay me damages, child support, and repay the debt. It seemed they were both quite put out by it all. They pleaded multiple times through their lawyer for a reduction, but in the end, the recording Susie had made in the car served as evidence, and no reduction was granted. I wondered why Susie had been recording. When I asked, she said she'd seen it on a TV show she'd watched with Lisa, and had decided to do the same. As I thought, Susie really was clever. At the same time, I wondered what Lisa had been showing her. Since then, Susie and I have been living with Lisa. Her house wasn't far away, so it wasn't an issue for Susie to commute to school. We got the car back safely, and John was dealing with the debt. If he hadn't done all these strange things, John wouldn't have ended up in this debt-filled hell. This situation would definitely not have gone smoothly if it hadn't been for Lisa and Susie. I continue to work every day to provide a happy life for